Okay.
Right. Remind members that this meeting will be recorded and ask members to note that mobile phones should be switched off as they interfere with the recording. Tablet devices should be switched to mute, which is FN and F8. And I remind members to declare interest as appropriate through the meeting. And I remind members to keep their questions short and concise with one question and appropriate supplementary per member. We will go around again for further questions as time allows. Declare the meeting open. Agenda item number 1 is apologies. Do we have any apologies? No, that Michelle McAveen is ill. Any further apologies? Okay. Agenda item number 3 then is minutes of the meeting, the 4th of March 2014. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting on the 4th of March? Pages 6 to 11. Are members content that the draft minutes are accurate? If so, I will sign. Members agreed? Thank you. Okay, then agenda item number 4 then is matters arising. Can I refer members to the matters arising at pages 15 to 30? And on pages 13 there's suggested actions with regards to matters arising. Are members content to action as suggested on the matters arising? Okay, agreed.
Chairman, just on one issue regarding the live exports, it looks as if they are opposed or unable or unwilling to facilitate any live exports of cattle from Northern Ireland.
What page is that, Joe? What number is that?
The letter on page 18.
Okay. You want to bring anything up, Joe, on that?
No, just to note that, Chairman, I just want to make that comment and then see what we hear.
See what happens.
Yeah.
In future. Okay. Are members content then to action as suggested? Agreed? Okay. Agreed. Can I refer members then to the matters to correspondence from the Minister at the table papers? Members recall that letter issued to the Minister last week requesting that she provides the committee with an update on her thinking in respect to CAP Pillar 1 and urging her to bring proposals to the Executive. The Minister has now replied and has advised that she is minded to cancel all existing single farm payment entitlements at the end of 2014 and reallocate them based on the area of land declared in 2015. She is also minded not to restrict the number of entitlements that can be established in 2015 to the number of eligible hectares in 2013. The Minister further advises that the basis for calculating the initial value of 2015 entitlements will be derived from the value of single farm payment entitlements held in 2014. In the final paragraph of her letter, the Minister is seeking the view of the committee and seeks support to announce the decision she has reached as soon as possible. That's on pages 3 of our table papers. Page 3 and 4. Members, this brings us to the crux of the debate last week with regards to Oliver's proposal. And again, whilst I would have no problems supporting that aspect of CAP, I would be reluctant to support parts thereof of any CAP until we've seen the whole proposal on CAP and what she will be taking to the Executive, and not only what proposals she has to take to the Executive, but also what bids, what money or funding she's going to bid for within the Executive. Has members any thoughts on this? Oliver, I'll bring you in if you wish.
No, I just listen for the time being.
Okay, no problem. Any other comments, members?
Well, Chairman, I think there's a couple of points. Obviously, it's very hard to give a definitive read on it, but on the face of it, it would appear that all of the money that would be allocated for 2014 has been protected in relation to that being used as the basis for further years of 2015. Also, it would appear reasonable and desirable that the 2015 entitlements will be based on the then new acreage that might be applied for, and not just the hectares that had been agreed for 2013. So on the basis of those two things, it looks favourable, but that's without having had time to consult or to have a more critical appraisal of the situation. But on the face of it, it looks reasonable, Chairman.
Yeah, I think I would agree with the Vice Chair. I think it's in around what we expected the position to be, I think.
Would members be content to respond to the Minister to say, yes, that whilst we would have sympathy with the specific proposals suggested in our last paragraph, that we would wish to see the full proposal of CAP going before the executive as soon as possible?
Yes, I think that's desirable.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be desirable.
Are members agreed? Okay, yeah, agreed. Okay, thank you, members.
Can you say that again? You're very quiet. You want to get the chair to sign it down first?
Yeah, that's fine. Joe, Deputy Chairperson, myself will sign that letter off. Happy enough. Okay. Sorry, Oliver.
Chair, can I go back very quickly to that article or the thing on page 18 that Joe brought up there
Okay.
on the export of live animals. I think it's worth noting in the letter itself that the current political situation, for example, in Libya,
Yep.
and I think the whole issue around the welfare of the animals. It states in the letter there, I think that should be noted.
And a note it just.
I'd like them bits noted, the welfare and also the political situation in Libya, for example.
Yeah.
Makes everything a wee bit difficult
Yeah.
at the present time, but
Okay.
Okay. Okay, members agreed then to move on. Agenda item number 5 then is the SR 2014/23, the Gang Masters Licensing Exclusions Regulation, Ireland 2014, an oral briefing from DARD and the Gang Masters Licensing Authority. The members may wish to refer to a list of potential topics and issues on the Gang Masters briefing at pages 8 to 10 of the tabled papers. Members can choose from this list, or indeed there's absolutely no problems with asking their own specific questions on this. Now there are a list of 11 questions. If anyone wants to ask a specific question, if they even want to notify Stella here, I will not hold up proceedings any further. As we hear from the officials, if that's okay. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 32 to 36, the motion of the prayer of annulment at pages 37, and papers from the department at pages 38 to 65. The amendments made to the SR have been included at pages 3 to 12 of the tabled papers. The amendments relate to schedule to the regulations at page 7, paragraphs 12 and 13, and have been highlighted. The SR as laid we are considering today is at pages 56 to 65 of our packs, in case there's confusion there with so many papers. Members will recall that this was discussed in some detail at last week's meeting, and a decision was made to defer consideration of the SR until a briefing was received from the department. The committee will today be asked to either agree the statutory rule, which is an amendment to one of the regulations arising out of the Gang Masters Licensing Act 2004, or table a prayer of annulment that will allow the Assembly the opportunity to vote on whether the amendment to the regulation is introduced in Northern Ireland or not. We do have an issue with some of it, and we wanted to inquire and find out more details on it. So without further ado, can I welcome to the committee Kieran Cunningham, DARD, Deputy Principal, Ian Japp, Gang Masters Licensing Authority, DEFRA, Enforcement Division, and David Nix, Gang Masters Licensing Authority, DEFRA, Policy Division. You're very welcome to the committee, gentlemen. I believe one or two of you have to leave pretty sharpish to go to further business back over in England, so we appreciate your time here with us today to try and clarify the situations and assuage the concerns of some of the members here and the committee in totality. So without further ado, can I ask who's going to lead off in a presentation? Here? Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to give you a bit further background to the Gang Master Licensing Regulations in Northern Ireland 2014. As you already alluded to, I'm joined by David Nix here on my left from the Head of Licensing at the Gang Masters Licensing Authority, and Mr Ian Jobb here, Senior Investigation Officer for the UK. You requested further briefing on the back of your last meeting, and I know now you've received that, and I would just like to take you through some background outlining the 2014 exclusion regulations. Following on from 2004 and the tragic Morecambe Bay tragedy where 23 Chinese cockle pickers lost their lives, the Gang Masters Licensing Act 2004 was introduced with the primary objective of curbing activities of those types of gang masters or labour providers who exploit their workers or act illegally. The Act applies to labour providers operating in agriculture, horticulture, the gathering of shellfish, and the processing and packaging of agricultural fish and shellfish produce. The Act applies to the whole of the UK, and the established Gang Masters Licensing Authority was set up to operate as a licensing scheme to those gang masters. The aim of the licensing scheme is to prevent worker exploitation to ensure that those holding a licence operate within the law. The 2004 Act also created the offences of acting as an unlicensed gang master and the using of an unlicensed gang master. Following a UK consultation on the operation of the Gang Masters Licensing Authority earlier this year, in which this consultation also was represented here in Northern Ireland, we had one response from the Guard Forest Service. It was concluded that the GLA would focus on protecting the most vulnerable workers in areas where we needed to devote more resources to dealing with criminal gang masters, and those that work in low-risk activities should be removed from the scope of the licensing scheme. The Gang Masters Licensing Exclusion Regulations 2014 build on previous exclusion regulations in 2006 and in 2010, which had previously come through this forum. And this details those circumstances where a gang master or labour provider does not obtain a gang master's licence. The 2014 regulations include those businesses and activities exempt under the 2010 regulations and details a number of additional businesses and activities that would not be required to obtain a gang master's licence. Other than businesses and activities currently exempt under the 2010 regulations, the additional businesses and activities that would be exempt from having to obtain a gang master's licence under the 2014 regulations include workers in the shellfish sector, and this only refers to ones that are from the cultured shellfish sector, workers in the forestry sector, veterinary practice workers, apprentices, farmers raising crops or livestock for a third party, and finally voluntary workers. These updated regulations remove the regulatory and cost burden placed on certain businesses and activities where there is seen to be a low risk of worker exploitation. For example, the new 2014 regulations will allow for the supply of volunteers to carry out conservation work on agricultural land without the need for a gang master's licence. So if you take, for instance, if there was, like I live down the Mourne, so say the Mourne Heritage Trust wanted to get a group of people together to go to pick the litter off the land, that voluntary organisation would need to become a gang master. You can imagine that regulatory burden isn't required in this instance. The new regulations also include or introduce the exclusion from licensing for the use of a worker in connection with the provision of a service to a third party in the forestry sector. Again, it's seen that the forestry sector is well regulated in terms of there's good coverage from other departments. These regulations mirror the Gang Masters Licensing Regulations 2013, which are currently apply in England, Scotland and Wales, and will mean that those businesses now exempt from having to obtain a licence will be on a level footing with labour providers in the rest of the UK. In response to your request, you asked to hear more from DEFRA. I've obviously got my colleagues here, and and they would be best placed to field any questions in terms of the committee have in terms of enforcement and wider policy issues. And that's my presentation.
Okay, does Ian, David, do you want to add anything at this particular stage, or do you want to just...
No, I'm quite happy to answer any questions members may have.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Kieran, then, for your presentation. I suppose the question I would ask before the members ask questions is what is the, and you've outlined some of them, Kieran, but what is the consequences here if, for instance, we do put a prayer annulment down and the Assembly takes the opportunity to stop this SR? What are the consequences? Because it does state in the Dard letter on page 4 that it would leave labour providers operating in Northern Ireland bearing an additional cost compared with their competitors in GB.
Yes.
Cost is one thing, but then there's an enforcement issue also.
Yes, so there's obviously, to get a licence, and my colleagues here will fill me in more, there's obviously regulatory requirements that you have to meet. So obviously you have to keep records, and David maybe could fill us in more. But there's a lot of requirements that what we're saying is these low-risk industries already have a lot of good practice in place. And then there's around £2,000 for the licence. So to some small, of course, that's quite a lot of money. And as we said at the start, these areas are seen as low risk. And it's been consulted like across the UK that everybody has agreed that these are low risk and that they can be managed in a better way through other.
So those low risk industries or employers will then be exempt
Yes.
from gang master regulations and requirements. Where's the if that's the cost burden, then what's the enforcement issue?
Well, Ian's head of enforcement, if you want to just elaborate on that.
The Gangmasters Licensing Act of 2004 creates the offence of not having a licence, and that's a licence to supply into the sectors that we regulate. These originally included the items that here are now we are seeking to be exempted, particularly forestry. If you take Scotland, where I'm based currently, there were over 170 licences for gangmasters in forestry in Scotland, and now we have a situation where we've progressed, where we were issuing those licences for free, and now we've exempted them totally. So instead of 1,200 licensed gangmasters as we had before the regulations come in, we're down now just over 1,000. But at the same time, we have regulated those industries. We've seen that there is very little chance of exploitation, and because of the red tape challenge that the authority was placed under by the government, we've decided that these are parts of the industry which we previously regulated that are the least contentious, if you could understand.
With regards then to the specific nature of Northern Ireland having a land border, does this SR, does this subordinate regulation actually cover that? Is it fit for purpose in Northern Ireland with regards to the land border?
Well, I would certainly think it does. We have, we have, and I think David gave us some figures. We have 105 businesses based in the rest of the UK that supply into Northern Ireland, as it stands at the moment.
That would also include people who are in the Republic of Ireland supplying to the Northern Ireland as well.
We have that. We have 25 businesses based in Northern Ireland which can supply to the rest of the United Kingdom. So if you can see, it's a reciprocal situation. And as David alludes to, we have businesses in the Republic of Ireland. We have businesses with a gangmaster licence as far away as Hong Kong, which actually can supply into anywhere in the United Kingdom.
Okay, Robin Swan.
Thanks, Gerald. You've already touched on, I think, my concerns that I've raised at the last two committee meetings. So just to clarify, a company supplying labour into Northern Ireland from the Republic must hold a gangmaster's licence?
Yes, that's correct.
If they were found not to, who prosecutes them?
Well, we have actually found that, but the situation is the Act that we work under only applies to the environments of the United Kingdom. If they're based in the Republic, we can't prosecute them. What we can do is, obviously, and have done, is encourage them to get a licence to supply the workers, and we have done that. We actually went as far as taking it to PPSNI one time to try and see if they would enforce the prosecution, but unfortunately the law just doesn't apply. We can't do that. It's the same actually which we have if we have another member of the EU states which is actually supplying unlicensed. We again work with the governing bodies in those areas to try and dissuade them from supplying or else encourage them to get a licence.
It's just more of it, there's no enforceability then.
Well, the other side of the coin is it's an offence to be unlicensed. It's also an offence to use somebody unlicensed. So the recipients of that labour from an unlicensed gangmaster could also be committing a criminal offence. So we do have the opportunity to target them. But in terms of the unlicensed gangmaster, if they're outside of the UK, it obviously makes prosecution incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
Is there a requirement then on the employer of a gangmaster to check his licence? Is that covered in the legislation?
Yep.
What penalty is there for not doing that?
They can be prosecuted under section 13(1) of the Act, and it relates to a labour user who takes workers from an unlicensed gangmaster. And they can actually get as much as a 6-month period in prison for the offence.
Right.
We have enough from Joe Byrne, Deputy Chairperson.
Yeah, Chairman, much on the same theme. In relation to, in particular, the mushroom industry, and it's largely an industry that's in the border counties of both Northern Ireland and the Republic, there is a fear that, you know, some workers are exploited and work in bad conditions and indeed including housing conditions. Given that the gang masters can be legal, what happens to those unfortunate individuals that are hired informally and may not have come through a legitimate gang master licensed operator? Is there a sufficient inspector to look after the interests of those unfortunate individuals that do need protection?
Well, if I can answer that, we have 2 officers based in Northern Ireland. I manage these officers along with a team throughout the United Kingdom of 29 enforcement officers, who any of whom can be called across to assist the 2 officers based here. You must appreciate, sir, that what we have to do is have the information in the first place that a worker is being exploited. And unfortunately, because many of them are migrants, they are reluctant to come forward. But what I can tell you is that on every occasion we have received the information, we have investigated, and we have actually prosecuted 2 unlicensed gangmasters who were supplying to the mushroom industry.
So, Chairman, can I further ask who the individuals here today regard this as a problem of concern, or is it a manageable problem?
Well, without actually knowing the extent, what I can say is that the 2 officers based here are extremely industrious, and they engage with all the bodies we would expect would tell us if workers were coming forward. And by that I mean help agencies who such workers are more willing to come forward to, say, rather than the government officials or the police. And we engage with them, and we weigh up the consequences of whether or not our action would mean any detriment to the individual workers. However, if they are willing to work alongside us, we will, first of all, try to ensure that their working conditions are improved, and if unfortunately the situation is they are being supplied by an unlicensed gangmaster, we would have no hesitation in taking a prosecution and referring it to the appropriate prosecution authority.
Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, Joanne Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. My question was largely in the line of the Vice Chairs. In my own constituency, I know there's a lot of migrants, for example, in the mushroom sector as well, and many of them don't know the distinction between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and take on face value what they're told. I was going to ask, and I know the Vice Chairs touched on it, how to ensure that the workers are fully aware of their rights of employment, and language being, as you rightly said, Ian, a barrier for the employment in the sector. How do you ensure that they fully know their rights?
Well, we started licensing gangmasters in 2006, and at that point there was a huge publicity campaign, and we produced numerous leaflets which we took to help agencies, notably STEP in Dungannon, and we put them into libraries in Northern Ireland, because a lot of migrant workers come to libraries to use the computer facilities. We have thereafter followed up by the 2 officers who are based here. They are in constant contact with any agency which supports workers' rights, and we continually go out and update the situation as regards the situation. If you take recently, we have Romanians and Bulgarians who have now been allowed to work. They were speaking about mushroom industry. Before that, they were coming in under the sector-based scheme, where the mushroom industry was an industry whereby they could get a work permit, and we have dealt with complaints from workers, and we've thankfully resolved them in connection with those.
Okay, that's good.
One of our strengths, if I could just add to that, is that our inspectors interview workers when we go out. So we always try and raise awareness when we go out and interview in those cases, and hopefully there's an element of word of mouth as well from that.
Okay, so that
Do
connection
rely.
is made. I'm just concerned about the vulnerability, particularly over the language issues.
It's a huge challenge. It is getting the most vulnerable people to come forward. It is you know, you can't pretend otherwise. It is really, really difficult, and that's where we do rely on, particularly working with the support organisations that are out there, and getting them, and they, you know, our officers over here have made good contact with them, and getting them to come forward with the intelligence which allow for us to investigate the allegations.
Can I ask then how many inspections take place each year in Northern Ireland? And perhaps you could also let us know how many GLA officers there are operational here, and are they full-time? I know you touched on 2 earlier. Could you outline?
Yeah, there are 2 full-time officers in Northern Ireland. I supervise them along with 29 other officers. Last October, we were engaged in an operation in connection with workers in Lurgan. We brought over 5 officers to assist, and they were over for 3 days assisting. If you can understand me as well, that one of our greatest partners in dealing with worker exploitation is PSNI, and we've been out in operations in Northern Ireland when we've visited many as 36 police officers out working with us. And actually those 2 instances, the prosecutions which involved the unlicensed gangmasters in the mushroom industry, there was that similar commitment from PSNI to assist us.
So given the particular issues regarding the border, do you believe that the GLA in Northern Ireland is appropriately resourced? I know you spoke of bringing in outside officers needed to handle issues which are raised, and is there appropriate awareness of the existence amongst those who employ workers, especially migrant workers who come under remit?
Well, we hope so. My understanding is that our research has shown that there are some, I think, 37 mushroom farms in Northern Ireland. We know that as part of the early remit of the officers, we tried to visit as many of them as possible to make an awareness of the GLA. Some of these farms recruit directly. If they are not employing a gangmaster, then there is no locus for the GLA in connection with that. But at the same time, what we then try to do is just try to raise awareness of the standards we try to promote within our Act.
Okay, Tom Buchanan.
Thank you. Under section 12, it would appear that there's been 5 convictions, and under section 13, 1 conviction. Can you clarify what constitutes a section 12 and a section 13 conviction?
Yeah, section 12 is the offence of not having a gangmaster licence. That's what the Act says. The Act is very specific. You are not allowed to supply into the sectors which we regulate without the required licence. So in other words, that would be the labour user, labour provider supplying to a labour user. The labour user taking workers from an unlicensed gangmaster is the section 13 offence. On the section 13 offence, there is a time bar of 6 months from detection of the offence to the summons being issued. I can honestly state that in all occasions when we put forward a prosecution, that where there is evidence of the Section 13 offence, that is put forward with a more serious offence, the Section 12 one. Sometimes that time bar has been exceeded by the time the investigation has concluded. In other occasions, the prosecutor has taken the decision to use the labour user as a witness against the other person, the labour provider.
But it would appear surely that if Section 12 is for the gangmaster, and it's only if someone's caught with no licence and the fine is only somewhere between £500 and £750, for a commercial business this isn't much of a deterrent for someone who hasn't got a gangmaster's licence.
I would agree totally, but on the other hand, I have no say in what fines should be. What I can say is that as we have progressed throughout the United Kingdom, the fines that are being levied are much more, as I would say, realistic in terms of a business person and a business. We actually have one business that was fined in the region of £45,000 in England in connection with supply to the milk industry. We have other prosecutions ongoing at the moment, which we think will result in jail sentences for unlicensed gangmasters.
We recently had a custodial sentence of somebody being sentenced for 7 years in England. I mean, sentencing is a matter for the courts. It's difficult, but the sentences are there, and I think it's particularly some of the criminality we're now coming into. I think we'll see some of the sentences increasing.
Yeah. And are you aware of the scale of unlicensed businesses within Northern Ireland?
Well, I joined this job 8 years ago, and at that time it was thought that in the United Kingdom there was something like 4,000 potential gangmasters. Now, because of the decline in the economy, a great many will have left the industry. But I would think with the numbers we've got at the moment, I think we're saying that more than 2,600 have come forward, either applying for licences over that 8-year period, and some of them have had to give up their licences. So I think we're making a very good inroads into who we should be licensing. There will always be work ongoing in connection with this, but unless we receive the intelligence along with working with the partner agencies, what I can say is that the officers here and the rest of the officers, there is a will to take forward any investigation.
Right. You had 5 convictions under Section 12. What period of time was that for?
These are a period, the officers in Northern Ireland started in 2007, so that is to date. What we have is a situation that obviously we were encouraging people to get a gangmaster licence in the first place, and sometimes a warning was given in the proviso that these people came forward and took a licence. So it wasn't necessarily the first choice to go and prosecute somebody. We have thereafter, as time has gone, we have realised that because the legislation has been in place for some time, that perhaps a prosecution is now the way forward.
The first prosecution was in 2010.
Yeah.
First conviction.
Right. Quite a number seems to have come forward and applied for their gangmaster's licence. Are you aware of any that are still operating without a gangmaster's licence?
We have at the moment 3 prosecutions going forward to PPSNI in connection with unlicensed gangmasters. In connection with that, our officers are investigating other offences as we sit here.
Okay.
Alderman McMullen.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. What's the difference between you and an employment agency? Between a gangmaster and an employment agency?
Nothing.
Nothing really.
It's employment agencies that are supplying workers into the GLA regulated sectors need a gangmaster's licence.
So, where did this word gangmaster come out of? It seems very exciting, you know, but what really...
It's a very... It is a very, very historic term. I think there was a Gangmasters Act back in the 19th century, and it's a term that the industry absolutely hate. from a publicity angle, it's very useful for us because it does actually grab headlines and it does stick in the mind. But it is something the industry are very uncomfortable about because it does have negative connotations. There are a lot of big gang masters out there, and sadly there are a few that actually do tarnish the name of it. It's a term that we are stuck with because it is in our primary legislation. But as I say, we do make use of it in terms of publicity purposes.
And how do you work between your, well, how do social services work then? You're after the gang masters, I take it you're after the ones that employ the people. What about the people that's employed? Are they all getting the minimum wage and all of that?
Well, we have, part of the licensing requirements of having a licence, we have adopted licensing standards, and that sets the framework that we expect people to comply with. And that covers basically common sense laws that every other business should comply with, and that includes the minimum wage, it includes health and safety, if transport's been provided, if accommodation's been provided, the right to work as well. So having a licence is the framework for compliance. It doesn't mean if you've got a licence that you're perfect all the time. People can drop below the standard, and that's where our compliance will come into effect.
Oh, it's not compulsory?
Yes.
It is compulsory?
Yes.
Yes. We'll also work in DARD. We have agricultural wages, so if these guys go in on a specific agricultural issue and it becomes aware that they're not being paid correctly on their agricultural wages, DARD have an inspector side that will go in and investigate that part of the offence as well.
Right. And how do you work with immigration then? We see the TV programmes of immigration, people coming taking illegal people out. Are they not gang masters too? Or?
Well, the majority of people that are actually working for gang masters in the UK and Northern Ireland are members of the EU states with right to work in the United Kingdom. They were the 8 countries that came in 2004, followed by the Romanians and Bulgarians. Obviously, as part of our inspectorate role of gang masters or would-be gang masters, we asked to view the employment history of people, and if we detect that somebody there may not have the right to work in the United Kingdom, we have a memorandum of understanding for Home Office immigration, and we direct them, and in some cases we would actually remain on the premises, and if they can attend, to deal with that matter.
And how does a gang master, you see the gang masters as far away as Hong Kong?
Yeah.
How does that work?
That gang master undertakes to supply workers in the United Kingdom. That gang master was initially based in the Isle of Man. He came for inspection. If we want to further inspect his records, his business model, he is requested to come to the United Kingdom for a compliance inspection.
Well, that's the fact that we're licensing people to take workers from Hong Kong here to work on their own industry.
Not necessarily,
The
sir.
business that's based in Hong Kong is more for, the business that's based in Hong Kong is more for tax purposes as opposed to looking at bringing.
So we're supporting a tax loophole. That makes great headlines. You know, this is
That would be a matter for revenue and customs.
Yes. Who again, we have a memorandum of understanding to pass intelligence to.
we the taxman had the same memorandum of understanding with me.
I'm going to come back to you if you have other questions, Oliver, because there is other...
Yes, very quickly, and
No, I'll come back to you. I'm going to bring in
Okay,
Rob
sorry.
Scott, and then I'll bring you...
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly, gentlemen, you mentioned everybody. Do you work with the National Crime Agency?
Yes, we do. It's been realised that recently that organised crime groups have started infiltrating the supply of workers, and we very much work with the National Crime Agency. Anyone who comes to the attention of the police through the National Referral Mechanism then is signposted towards the National Crime Agency, and we work with them. Matter of fact, on a weekly basis I attend meetings in police forces where the National Crime Agency are also seated at the table.
We recently did an operation jointly with the police in Cambridgeshire, and it was, on the day of the operation there was 300 officers there. A large number of those were from the National Crime Agency.
So, taking that into consideration, do you find it a drawback then if this legislation was to be introduced in Northern Ireland where the National Crime Agency is no locus?
Well, as I say, we have, since I started working for the GLA, I've had the utmost cooperation from PSNI officers. And as I've recounted how we can have them assisting us. As I say, in October, we had every bit of cooperation from them without the National Crime Agency.
If we had a National Crime Agency, would there be a benefit to your work?
It would obviously be. Any partner is a benefit.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, just final question from me then is the Annex A, Appendix 2 of the exclusion regulations, paragraph 18, introduces, page 51 of our packs. Paragraph 18 of the schedule introduces an exclusion for farmers who use workers either directly employed by them or who have been supplied to them by a licensed gang master to grow crops or raise livestock, or the crops and livestock on behalf of a third party. The exclusion would only apply where ownership of the crops or livestock remains with a third party. Can you tell us just of a scenario where that would actually be the case in Northern Ireland? Are there any examples that you would know of?
Right, I'm not sure whether this is the case in Northern Ireland. I imagine it's so, but certainly in England and Scotland and Wales, the way the farming industry operates is one farm may have surplus crop, and they'll come to arrangements with another farm for the sale of the crop and the harvesting of that crop, and that is quite commonplace. And actually what we found was that inadvertently numerous farmers, which the legislation was never intended to be classing them as gangmasters, were suddenly caught by the Act and could be potentially committing a criminal offence. So that was the driver behind that particular exclusion. And I suspect that similar kind of arrangements take place in Northern Ireland as well, where you will have the way that you would sort of grow a certain amount, but actually you don't need all of that, so you come to an arrangement with a fellow farmer. And just those kind of arrangements, you could inadvertently make one of them a gangmaster. So he's trying to deal with those kind of technical practicalities of how the farming industry actually operate.
Okay, any further questions? So, Ian?
Sorry, just a short question, Chair, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. And maybe it has been covered or whatever, but is £2,250 licence?
That's the upfront cost for when somebody first applies.
So how, my question would be then, is it renewed after a certain period of time? Is it reviewed?
Well, it's granted for a year, the licence, and then after that the renewal fee comes down to, this is for the smallest businesses with a turnover of less than £1 million. The renewal fee would just be £400. There's no compliance check at renewal as such. We just then, as soon as somebody's licensed, we're then completely intelligence-led. Just in terms of, we don't want to be burdening people who are compliant. So that's where we rely on the good intelligence to come in and we'll then go out and inspect as necessary.
It's about rewarding good compliance. It's about rewarding good compliance. I mean, there's no point putting a huge cost on somebody that complies.
Declan McAleer.
Chair, apologise if this is right to ask, because I appreciate it's a bit late. See the topic that refers to the risk of the activities. Has that been mentioned here yet, or how do you determine which activities are low risk so they can be removed from the regime?
Well, there was an extensive consultation by DEFRA last summer, and the areas that have been identified were considered to be where the chances of worker exploitation, particularly measured against our licensing standards, were considered to be low enough that there were areas that should be deregulated from needing a licence. The list of activities that are being excluded, but by and large it's been negligible enforcement activity for us and compliance activity for us over our lifetime. So we've had that sort of experience that we know we're not going to put more people at risk by removing them from the visibility of the licensing regime. I'm not going to say there aren't going to be one or two isolated instances, but taken across the piece, we were comfortable that if you take those out, we can then be better targeted on the highest risk areas. That was the rationale behind the list of activities that was excluded.
And is the legislation robust enough to change that should any risk levels change or alter?
The ministerial statements by DEFRA ministers at the time were that if evidence came to the contrary, that those activities could be reintroduced back into licensing.
Okay, does the members have any other queries? I'm going to put the question, but just before I do, if there's any other queries members have, certainly it's the time to ask it whilst we have the gentleman here. If there are no other questions, I will put the question to the committee, that the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development has considered SR 2014/23, the Gangmasters Licensing Exclusion Regulations, Northern Ireland 2014, and has no objections to the rule. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, that's agreed then. So thank you very much for your time. It's been very, very useful to have you here. You've explained a lot to us, and we appreciate that.
And your appreciation for allowing us to come on early is much.
I know, that's no problem. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, members, thank you for that. Moving on then, agenda item number 6 is the Reservoirs Bill, Clerk's memo on key issues. Can I refer members to the Clerk's memo on key issues and allocated questions on the Reservoir pages, or Reservoir Bill on pages 67 to 72. Members should refer to this during the oral evidence sessions. This rota does not prevent members asking supplementary or other questions as they see fit. As agreed, I, as chair, will ask the questions on the topic allocated to members that aren't present or are absent. Can I also remind members that not all questions will be appropriate to all witnesses? Can I also refer members to correspondence from the Committee for Regional Development in respect of the Reservoirs Bill on pages 73 to 74, and the key stages of reservoirs legislation timeline on pages 75? Can I remind members that the Clerk has previously declared that a family member is a member of the Armagh Fishing Club. That family member is not in front of us today as a witness. Can I also remind members that we have organised a stakeholder event for the private sector next Thursday the 18th at 5:30 p.m. So far we have 6 people attending and we'll have 1 table for discussion. In case we need 2 tables, can I ask another member to... Sorry, we have to...
No, we're okay on quorum.
Okay, we're just on the line, Joanne, so if you can, appreciate if you can come in as quickly as possible. So far we have 6 people attending and we'll have 1 table for discussion. In case we need 2 tables, can I ask another member to volunteer to facilitate? I think best maybe that Stella would send out maybe an email maybe on that aspect of that. Just get my pack in my hand. Okay, agenda item number 7 then is the Reservoir Bill, oral briefing from Antrim and District Angling Club and Armagh Fisheries Limited. Can I refer members to the briefing paper from Antrim and District Angling Club and Armagh Fisheries Limited at page 77. Can I welcome Maurice Ferguson, Chairman of the Antrim and District Angling Association, Aidan Donnelly, Chairman of the Armagh Fisheries Limited, and Cathal Doyle, Armagh Fisheries Limited. You're very welcome to the committee, to this scrutiny of the Reservoirs Bill. You're very welcome. Do you have presentations for us?
I have just a few points.
Few points, okay, and then we can go into questions. That's no problem.
Certainly, thank you. Armagh District Angling Club are in broad agreement with the proposed Reservoirs Bill and the need for appropriate legislation to minimise the risk of a breach and any subsequent detrimental effect this would have on either life and or property. We would also welcome the introduction of an appropriate maintenance regime to aid us being able to fully comply with the bill. Our reservoirs not only supply angling to our local community but also to visiting anglers and tourists. One of our reservoirs supplies the water necessary to run our fish hatchery, in which we raise the fish we stock into lakes and rivers under our control. Angling in the Armagh area also supports local traders in the area, including tackle shops, fish feed merchants and local fish farmers. Armagh Angling Club is a non-profit making organisation that runs on a largely voluntary basis to improve angling and enhance the environment, both flora and fauna. We promote protection of our indigenous species of brown trout and are constantly aware of the need for biosecurity to minimise the introduction of alien species into our lakes and reservoirs. The current plan to introduce legislation contained in the Reservoirs Bill will take into account health and safety issues which have never perhaps been fully addressed in Northern Ireland, which any right-minded individual and angling club would wholly welcome. A major source of anxiety and concern for our club are the costs which may arise from registration, inspection, remedial work and upkeep. We as a club do not have the necessary finance, nor have we any identifiable way of raising the money required. And a major fear would be that without accessible grant aid from the government and perhaps other clubs will be forced into bankruptcy, including ourselves, and reservoirs could be left abandoned or in risk of breach through a lack of monitoring and possible dam wall failure. Ultimately, we fear that the government will have to pick up that particular bill. Grant aid, if provided by government, would allow us as a club and other clubs to continue to develop amenities which would benefit the community, boost local economy and promote growth in tourism for the overall benefit of the Northern Ireland economy. Also, management of our reservoirs adds to the ecology of the Northern Ireland environment, which we're currently working with to plant indigenous trees and wildflowers around our reservoirs. That's really all I have at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Aidan, thank you very much. Morris, is it?
Morris, yep.
Morris,
Yep.
With Antrim and District Angling, have you anything to add at this stage?
Yep. Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity to make a presentation on this, which we regard as very important. I think, at the beginning I should really say, certainly Antrim District Angling Association has no difficulty with the bill per se. It goes without saying. Just a little bit of background about our association and so on. There's about 400 members, which is quite substantial. But in addition, we sell many permits, and we have like season permit holders and this type of thing. So we're an extremely important resource. And obviously then the permits, I should emphasise, as Aidan has emphasised and so on, they go to tourists and so on, when regarded really as one of the best rivers currently in the province, if not the best river. And reservoir as well, we have the facility. We're a charity, or what we would really term a local community business. We are not there to make lots of money for anyone other than ourselves. We don't employ any fisheries managers or anything. All the work is done by our members in the main. That's the way we sort of operate. The members are primarily, not all, but the bulk of them would be local. Antrim town itself is where most of them come from, is primarily a working class area. Many of our members are retired, many of them are young, and obviously lots in between.
Sorry, excuse me. Go ahead, Morris.
Our fees tend to be lower to try to make sure that our club is inclusive. That's really what we're about, is to make sure they're kept. We could become exclusive, increase the fees, etc. But the vast bulk of the members want to make it as an inclusive, as a local community organisation as they possibly can. I'll refer to just a number of points as I go along, and I'll refer specifically to the individual paragraphs. Now we have a reservoir, had this reservoir for many years. It's very well used. We regularly stock it, and it's and in fact, if you go there literally any day, there's some of the members are there to introduce kids to fishing or introduce others to fishing and so on, keep an eye on it, manage it. Fortunately, it seems in reasonable condition. That's the initial assessment and so on. However, members, I have to say to you, the future does not look so rosy in the context of this bill, and that is my initial message, I have to say. And I'll go through some of the items in the bill just to emphasise that. On paragraph 5, just in relation to definition and so on, it does mention about 10,000 cubic metres or more of water. It doesn't, there's no reference that I could see at first hand what that definition of water is. I'm not too sure whether that includes slurry and so on, but I would say to members, you know, the issue about, and I've seen one, for instance, there's one at Greenmount College. They've got large areas for treating runoff of farmyards and all this type of stuff, and a lot of those can amount to large amounts of leachate, as far as we're concerned, and could enter major rivers, in fact, if they were not secure and so on. So that's another area, and I'm not too sure if that is water or is that slurry. I don't know what the definition is. It just says water here. So from reading this, it does not seem to include that. I'll make that point. Paragraph number 5, the reservoir managers. I mean, whenever I read all that, the first question is, how, in the name of God, will we ever get a reservoir manager? I mean, it is, you know, it just bears no thinking, I have to say. In addition, you know, if there's not a reservoir manager per se, the club undertakes that role, and then the question then arises then, who then in the club is going to be appropriately upgraded? We don't have any officers. Who's going to be upgraded? Who's going to pay? When someone leaves and so on, who pays for the retraining? If we go to paragraph 14, and in the case of fees, registration, administration and so on, and it says here, the department may, by regulations. I've worked nearly all my life in public authorities, and I know exactly what that means. Don't need to tell my members that. Not at all. May means will. Absolutely. And therefore, there's an additional cost. Under number 12, in the case of offences in relation to registration, you just have a look at those following items to realise who in our club is going to manage this. It would seem like they may spend most of the time in jail. We can turn to item paragraph 10, this is page 13. The department may, after consulting the Institute of Engineers and such other organisations or persons it considers appropriate by regulations, makes further provision about the matters to be taken into account under the sections, etc., etc. In our case, who pays for all this? Part 3, paragraph 38, which is page 25. Construction or alterations of controlled reservoirs. And then if you turn then to paragraph 40, and then the reservoir manager of a controlled reservoir, which is to be subject to relevant works, must not later than 28 days before the proposed relevant works give notice to the department of the proposed works. And it tells you then the reservoir manager must not later than commission a construction engineer, give notice to the department, etc. Who pays? Supervision of the relevant works on the reservoir, which is paragraph 41. Supervision of relevant works and reservoir safety by construction engineer. Just read it. Who pays? Paragraph 52, under 16, under 52, controlled reservoirs, other requirements. And then, if you look at flood plans, paragraph 53, it says here, the department may, by regulation, of course they will do it. and who pays? If we turn to paragraph 63, which is part 6, civil enforcement, emergency powers and further offences. I really don't need to say any more. The Department, under item paragraph 69, Department's power to arrange taking of safety measures. An issue again, and if you look at subparagraph 6, the reservoir manager must pay the Department the amount of any cost reasonably incurred by it in making arrangements under this section. Who pays? Stop notices, which is under paragraph 75, the same. Who pays? Under paragraph 78, fixed monetary penalties. It's all there, members, you know. Under paragraph 80, fixed monetary penalties, criminal proceedings and convictions. Exactly the same. Under paragraph 81, you have more variable monetary penalties. Under paragraph 86, there's a relation to a range of miscellaneous items, recovery by the Department of certain costs, and paragraph 93, and it's the same. And under paragraph 95, offences again, exactly the same. And under subparagraph 3, a reservoir manager guilty of an offence under subsection in relation to a controlled reservoir, which is at the time of offence is committed a high-risk reservoir, is liable on summary conviction to a fine, etc., etc. In relation to the, there was a supplementary document which the association got as well, and so on. You know, there's a comment, and I'm sure you have this. Comment. It says the explanatory and financial memorandum, and under clause 120, and then it comes on to subparagraph there 21, financial effects of the bill. It mentions about a grant scheme, and Aidan's already made the point, and you can see exactly where we're coming from. I must say it is very unfortunate that, you know, again, no decision has been taken to introduce such a scheme, and we would have to be entirely pessimistic. In relation to human rights, I mean, I've indicated to the committee already what the makeup of Antrim is. It's not the most salubrious town in the province. The club aims to, as I said earlier on, aims to make sure that this is a community facility. This is not an exclusive facility. But I would have to argue and so on that it does impact on our human rights without a shadow of a doubt. And you just have to look at a range of individuals. And the very same thing, you know, Chairman, applies as well to the equality impact statement. I must say I'm surprised that that was not undertaken. And in conclusion, Chairman, the one thing that's missing out of the Reservoirs Bill, actually, there's no mention of decommissioning. And I could just give you the scenario of our association, because we have a reservoir. And if the association decided to say goodbye to the reservoir, we own the reservoir. If we decided to say goodbye, no more fishing, the question arises, who will buy under this bill? If we don't want to continue it, who takes that responsibility? Who is assuming the responsibility for safety and everything else? And the other question then, who makes safe? So that's the scenario. And if you conclude that through to its sort of ultimate conclusion, as it were, and that the club had to make it safe, they don't have the resources to do that, the club folds, so what happens to the reservoir issue? I must say I'm surprised as well that in relation to the supplementary document, etc., you know, I got a note this morning, and this is it here, just came through this morning. This is active communities consultation events. This is where the Assembly is encouraging communities to be active, in this case, sport. It could apply to health, could apply to social inclusion, all that type of stuff. Yet, this document makes no reference to this. This is actually what we are actually doing every day. We're doing these tasks. Yet someone has come along and say, look, we're going to make this so difficult for you that you'll not be able to do this. So on the one hand, we're encouraged. On the other hand, to say, no, we don't want you to do this. We're going to stop you doing this. We're an organisation that undertakes a very significant community role at no cost to anyone other than ourselves. And I could introduce you to many of the members and so on who spend hours making sure our fishery is in good order, whether that's the dam or the river and so on. It would seem to me that, you know, this particular bill, as it applies to us, it seems to say to us, you know, and this is the message to us, and this is the message that our members are reading this. It says, well done, guys, for what you've done. Here is the reward. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maurice and Aidan, for that presentation. Cathal, you want to add in at this stage, or are you happy enough?
Oh, I'm happy enough.
You're happy enough, okay. I'll let you go on a wee bit more than maybe I should have, Maurice, but
okay,
you were very, you were very forensic in your presentation, so that's actually something that we should be applauded. And most definitely, I certainly wasn't going to stop you in mid-flight. Aidan, you also were very good in your presentation also, and it's what this committee needs to hear when we scrutinise these clauses one by one. Just to get more, the members will have questions to ask you, which will glean out a lot of the information and maybe interrogate more the points you've already made. But just for the committee to get a sense of where Antrim and Armagh angling clubs are in this whole scheme of things. Antrim has one reservoir, one lake.
Yeah.
How many would Armagh have?
We have two.
Two. Okay. Do you have any notion at this present time of where those reservoirs will be in the whole scale of risk, high, medium or low?
High for R2.
Right. And have you been told that?
Yes.
Specifically by DARD?
Their preliminary designation is high.
It's high. Maurice, have you had any?
No, we haven't a designation from the department, but we've actually been, because obviously, as I said earlier on and so on, our members want to look after our interests and so on. So we've already employed a consultant engineer. But the reality of this is that it can change like that. We just don't know. The reservoir currently is okay. There's no major cause for concern.
What do you mean by okay? You mean the structure is sound?
It seems fine. It seems to be operating okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Well, can I ask, maybe more directed to Aidan, do you know the rationale and the reason why your reservoirs are at high?
Yes, well, if you interpret the bill, it's because we have one or more dwellings that would be in the inundation.
Yes.
If there were to be a breach, so obviously there would be damage if there was a major breach from the reservoir walls. That's my understanding.
And you say one or two dwellings?
I think the bill says if there's one or more, is the way it words it, that could be impacted on if there was a breach. So I'm taking that's why our reservoirs have been designated as high.
Yeah, the reason why I asked the question, just to put a context on it, Maurice, is that as we're looking at the bill and looking at the rationale, it is very clear that you could have a state-of-the-art reservoir. something akin to the Hoover Dam, but yet because of the population in the inundation area or in the population around, you could then be deemed as high risk, even though you have a state-of-the-art modern reservoir. Which, so really your destiny is not in your own hands at that point. No matter what you've done in the past, in order to keep the maintenance of a reservoir high, or keep it in good order. My fear has been that a lot of groups, maybe even a lot of councils, aren't aware of the full facts and figures around this bill. But I must say, looking at what you've done already up to date, you seem to be very much clued in into the aspects of it. I'm going to put it out to the members. Joe Byrne.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'm under pressure to get into a question, but I welcome the presentation by both the Antrim and District and the Armagh Fisheries Limited. It's very refreshing, and you're challenging with the orthodoxy, which is always good. And it's good to hear a former public servant saying that he can read with some scepticism the words that are used in official documents. In relation to the Antrim reservoir, do any water take supply from you?
Sorry?
Does any Northern Ireland Water take water from your reservoir?
No, they don't, no.
So this is a reservoir that's purely used by
Purely used for our purpose, yeah.
Okay. And you're the sole owners of it?
Yep.
What would the asset big value of the reservoir be?
Ours, under this bill, totally negative equity, Joe.
In relation to Armagh, I notice there's an Armagh Fisheries Limited, so it's a limited liability operation.
Yes.
And you own two lakes. Do any water take any water from you?
None.
So again, this is purely for recreation purpose?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Chairman. That's all I know.
Okay, Declan McLeod.
Chair, well, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
And I can see how passionate you are about all this. And I hope you appreciate that these are issues which we share, and I know Thomas and others have raised it in the committee before, and indeed I've raised it here and in the DRD committee whenever NIW came to meet us. And I know exactly what you're saying. One of the reasons I know it is that in my spare time I actually chair a group at home. We lease a reservoir, which is the bedrock of the community development of the area where I live, and we stock it and all that there. And we're looking at taking on a second lake, and obviously this is causing a bit of prohibition, you know, about what will the implications this be for a group, because like yourselves is a volunteer organisation. So, Chair, I think that really all I can say is that the points that were raised here today are the points which have been completely reinforced some of the thinking that we've been having, and I think that we need to be very, very forceful with DARD to provide clarity in these points. And you know, if needs be, we could put the brakes on it until we actually get some absolute clarity around the points that have been raised there about who's liable and who pays for all this here, because they are very, very valuable points. And again, I know at first hand the value of taking an asset like a reservoir and using it and maximising its use for community benefit. And I can understand where your passions come from and all this here, and your fears. And so, Chair, I think that just all I want to say is that, and again, is that the message has been heard louder and clearer than ever before today, and we should make sure that's passed on to DARD, and we should demand that we get clarity around all of the points raised. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, well, of course, DARD representatives have been following along on this journey that we're having. We have so many sessions, presentations to go through to get the full context of the bill, but your concerns are well made, Declan. I think that's the sense of the committee at this present time. Yes, so your concerns are very well made. You're happy enough even at that?
That's all. I don't think there's anything to add to what's been said, because those are the concerns of community organisations who use such facilities.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Ian Milne.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say exactly the same as what Declan has said, and I think I agree with everything you're saying, right? But we have to explore, if you like, and find out information from groups like yourselves as to how this here might affect you, And I just want to say there, that it seems to be in good shape. You said, the dam or the reservoir seems to be in good shape. But that'll not be good enough, in time to come, where you'll have to, you said you've got an engineer, for example, to take a look at it. But, in real terms, that engineer, if in future, if he's not a part of a panel, of engineers that's expert in his field, well then, I believe there that he won't be that report won't be acceptable, to DARD, right? So, it's very difficult to ask yourselves, how you're going to employ or an engineer and do all this when you're saying you're not in a position to pay anything. But I'd imagine there, at this stage, that there's a part in there for grants, right? And you're a charitable organisation, and I would imagine there that it has to be part of this bill is, to accommodate groups like yourselves that are a charitable organisation, to employ the like of engineers and go through the whole procedure, at no cost to the charitable organisation. Maybe I'm wrong on that, Chair, but I think that's the way, you should. Fair play to you for saying all the stuff you did today, but I think, when we come up with a bill, it'll not be left to a group like yourselves to, to foot the bill. I would imagine.
Okay, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, that's all I can add at this stage.
Okay, Tom Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair, and can I apologise for missing part of your presentation, but certainly I'll be following it up on Hansard. But in Clause 6, 4.2.1, I was coming back to some of the things Declan was touching on. It was previously assumed that any clubs or societies or charities that used the reservoirs would have been excluded from, from any liable here on this particular through this particular bill, and that it would have been the owner of the reservoir that would have, held accountable here. But then there's some clarity, I suppose, needed within the bill, for it would seem now that somebody of charity that's using it, or some of these other groups that would be using it, that they're the people could be held responsible rather than the owner of the reservoir. So when Northern Ireland Water was here and we questioned them on it, they said it didn't matter what charities used it, they would still be the people that would be responsible because they were the owners. And that's something that we did ask maybe a bit of clarity on. Where do you stand in this situation?
We own our reservoir.
And it doesn't matter what charities or clubs or societies use it, you're still...
Yep, we're the owner.
And you're still taking full
Yeah, and
responsibility?
technically we'd be the reservoir manager.
As indeed we would be.
We'd be the same.
There are no other clubs that use our reservoir. We're a bit, in some ways, like Morris. We have a number of members who pay a yearly fee to fish that. We own that reservoir, those two reservoirs, and therefore we would be seen as the reservoir owner.
Okay, that clears that, yeah.
Okay, William Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and can I apologise for not being here for your presentation? You say that you own two reservoirs. Are you aware of whether they are medium, low or high risk?
Yes, well, provisionally, from the Armagh point of view, we've been told they're high risk.
High risk?
Yes.
So therefore it would be causing you concern, I'm sure.
Quite a bit.
Given that, the legislation for high-risk reservoirs, I think here says that it has to be supervision by engineers at least twice a year.
Twice a year.
So as it stands, you would be liable for the cost of that, is that the case?
As it stands, without grant aid being agreed as part of this bill, we would be incurring those costs, yes.
Yeah, all right, yeah. Okay. I think many of us here in the committee have concerns in around this. Some of us feel this is a sledgehammer to crack a nut in regard to much of this,
Yes.
No, that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Morris, on a point you made, it is a live threat, although officials will tell you that it hasn't happened to date, and that is the decommissioning of reservoirs or the drawing down of reservoirs. From what we're led to believe, for that action to actually take place, you'll actually need to get planning permission in some instances. Is that something you've considered investigating at this point, or does that in itself, that process in itself, scare you? By the fact that that will cost money also.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, members have talked about this, and I mean that's why they are concerned about this bill. I mean, there's no getting away from it. I mean, we have discussed it, you know, and it's not just the cost of that. It's going to be it's also the ongoing cost of this whole exercise. Now, we've already spent $3,500 on engineers' reports, and that's what we've paid for that ourselves. And when you bear in mind that, you know, nearly half our members are honorary, are pensioners and stuff like that, and so on, you know. So these bills very quickly mount up. That's our incredible concern. I mean, never mind further down the road if we want to get rid of this thing, you know. Yeah. Comes to be, I mean, our reservoir, if you go to it, absolutely stunning site, absolutely fabulous, you know, and that's why people like it, you know.
Has Armagh considered?
If we decommission reservoirs, our club dies.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. And that's not something I'm willing to consider at this point in time. To decommission it certainly would take it out of you know, would no longer be a risk. But it really isn't what we're about as a community-based group. It doesn't help our situation.
Yeah.
It doesn't take us any further along. But certainly, yes, we've looked at that. As far as we're concerned, it's a non-goer at this point.
Yes. The question of engineers and the cost, Morris, I was going to ask you if you could detail the actual cost or spend that you've spent to date on consultant.
I don't have the detail here. There was an initial inspection and so on, primarily to make sure that structurally everything was okay. That was, just to the top of my head, was about 2006, 2007 and so on. And then subsequent to that, there's been more inspections, and then the engineers, which it happens to be, they are the approved engineers, only approved ones in the province and so on, so we have, yeah, and they are expensive. And then there was, we had then to put in place for our own benefit and so on, to make sure that there was a process in place with records and everything else to try to protect, should anything happen to this thing, to try to protect us as best we possibly could. So we have to put in place a whole recording of information, of inspections, of checkpoints and all this type of stuff. And then the engineers, obviously then, they drew up the documentation and everything else as to how that is done.
Yes. Do you feel, is it your understanding that the work that you have done to date could well form part of the requirements? I think it talks about a pre-commencement inspection report in clause 29 of the bill, where it talks about inspection timing and a reservoir subject to a pre-commencement inspection report. That could start the...
I suspect it will be part of it, yeah.
You feel that the work that you've done to date could...
Yeah, because it is, I mean, it's Scott Wilson, is that what you call him now? Right. It used to be Ferguson McIlveen and so on, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But yet, if you have no concept or no idea as to what band you will sit in with regards to high, medium and low, that then could be a twice yearly inspection that you would have to endure. If you're low, the costs are maybe minimal. Do you feel that your angst could be nullified, the club's angst could be nullified if you were to fall into the low category? Feel that you'd...
Well, I mean, the worry for members is that the parameters, as you can read through the legislation and so on, their proposed written legislation, that these may change. So we just don't know. And that's the way members say, well, you know, it looks pretty terrible, but there are a lot of mays in there, and there are a lot of options open to the department as to how they will manage the thing going forward, and it can change really quite dramatically.
Do you have any, maybe Marsh, you'll have this worked on through your work as with the consultant engineer, but do you have any idea of the capacity of your reservoirs?
No, we don't. I think there's an issue about calculating the volume and stuff like that. No, we haven't, because obviously then you've got to do depth probes and everything else and so on. You know, no, we haven't done that. I don't have the figure here. There's a very, very rough, but it's obviously well in excess of this figure.
Right,
You know,
okay.
we're about, our reservoir, I think, is about 5 acres.
Right.
Yeah,
So you feel it,
substantial, yeah.
so all three reservoirs, which basically has been presented today, would fall well above the 10,000?
Given if yours is 5 acres, ours are 26 and 60. Or no, 26 and 21. So we're well above
Yeah.
10,000
Substantial-
cubic metres squared.
Could I come in something, Chair?
Yeah, sorry, come
Just
on in.
on that point. So, you know, about these engineers then, you know, does engineer not give you the report to go as to how much is in, or is in this?
Aye, that's what I said. I think he gave a rough estimate and so on, but it's, you know, you'd have to go through an appropriate, I mean, you have to obviously measure the depth and all this type of stuff, yeah.
Aye.
Yeah, to get an
I
accurate
just want to
assessment.
ask one question. Is he an expert in the field of reservoirs?
Absolutely, they are.
That's-
Scott Wilson, rather,
that's what I
yeah, those are the engineers we use.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, in fact, as I understand, they are the only consultant engineers in reservoirs in the province.
Okay, thank you.
One of the requirements also then is not necessarily even your reservoir and the size and scale and the structure, but then also the flood plan.
Sorry.
Have you given any idea of that, or do you know the depth of detail you would have to go into that?
No, we don't. No, we've just. I'm not too sure. I mean, I haven't seen the sort of the parameters of that or what is required and so on. Yeah.
Joanne Dobson, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Can I apologise for missing your briefing? So my question might already have been answered. The Ulster Angling Federation are on record as requesting that DARD consider financial help for private reservoir owners to conduct the maintenance work. Do you support this? What's your view on this?
We'd support anything.
This is a bit of a silly question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's obviously the ongoing running costs and so on. This is going to be an issue, and as indicated at the beginning and so on, it can change at the drop of a hat, and the circumstances completely change. So there's a lot of, so it's not a matter just about the immediate work and so on. It's what is required for, which is basically, and I must emphasise this is a community organisation. This is not some private business or private consortium or anything like that and so on. And we just don't know what the situation is going forward. And certainly we do not have a lot of money to start doing major works.
What would you like to see come forward from the department then? What would, if you had a
From
aspirational
Armagh's
list?
point of view,
Yeah.
we would be welcoming virtually 100% grant aid.
We would fold without it. Our club would cease without grant aid, and it had to be
The fear we
100%.
yeah, we'd go bankrupt. It's as simple as that.
And as you say, the club would cease to exist then?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is the danger in all this. You know, you weren't in at the time and so on. I just painted a scenario that if our club decided, if they decided to say, look, we've got to get rid of this reservoir, and we say we close it, there's the whole issue about decommissioning and who pays for all that. And no one under these circumstances are going to buy it. Highly unlikely. So we abandon this. Who's going to accept responsibility?
Going to be liable.
Right? And then if the club turn around and say, no, if the club goes bust, then who's going to take the responsibility? We simply walk away and become bankrupt.
Would you still be
You
liable
still got a problem.
in essence for it?
Sorry?
Would you still be liable then for it?
If we're bankrupt, we're gone.
Okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't, you know, it doesn't solve the problem, you know?
That's a point I would like to clarify, when maybe get clarified from the department, because in most cases someone has to be liable. So even if an organisation or a body was to disappear or go bankrupt or fold and members disperse, and there's an object there that potentially, God forbid, a failure was to happen and something did happen horrendous, you would find that it's a bit like water, it trickles down somewhere. Someone will try and find someone responsible. So I think that's a point that we will have to make to try and clarify.
Yeah, a good point, Chair, but I mean, ultimately it is the members of the club. We're a member organisation. Ultimately the members of the club, but I don't know what the legal consequences are if all the members say, we resign.
Yeah. It
And that's
well-
what it says, you could.
It could well, and the onus could well fall on to the reservoir manager or the last reservoir manager, whoever that may be.
That's right,
It could be the chairman or of a
Or
club.
the trustees.
Trustees of the club, you know. So that's something I think we will need to clarify. Declan, you want to come on that point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for letting me back. And again, just as a question, I know it's very early days of the legislation, and you know, it'll not be maybe to roll it a bit further before you see what the implications might be. But from your early sight of it, do you think that the clauses within this bill will require you to do any more work than that you would habitually do to your reservoir anyway, to keep it in a health and, you know, conform to health and safety regulations at any rate?
Yes, it will definitely mean a huge difference.
Over and above what you're doing
yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. That's important.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you think, just with regards to the consultation beforehand, the original consultation stage, I think maybe Morris, you did raise it. Do you think was there enough made or done to actually make groups like yourself aware of the impact of the legislation? You did mention too, obviously you'll be akin to reading language and text like a bill, but to the people out there who are interested in angling, do they really have any chance when it comes to reading this bill and understanding the impact of it?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, we're an inclusive group and so on, and whilst there are one or two individuals within the club might have some of the knowledge and so on of what, you know, would be expected and so on. I mean, we did get a briefing when we were told initially and so on, we were informed initially and so on, that this was a bill that was likely to happen. And we were also told that it would really follow the bills that are currently in Scotland, England and Wales. And that's the avenue and that's the approach that we generally took. That's the sort of the lead we took. But no, I mean, members, you know, I have to say, no, members do not understand. You know, they don't understand, the bulk of them do not understand their role as members. You know, what their liability and so on is. No, they don't understand that. You know, I as chairman often say to it umpteen times, you know, whether they're recruiting members or whether they're undertaking certain tasks or making certain statements or whatever and so on, you know, just have to repeatedly emphasise, you know, their responsibilities when they're members.
To give you an analogy, it's a bit like, you know, being in a golf club. Most of the membership of a golf club will only go once a week and play a round of golf and go home. It's a very few core members who take the dealing of the administration of the club, legislation, health and safety, the whole. It is literally boils down to half a dozen to a dozen members of each of these clubs who really would be keeping their eye as best they can on the ball of what's going on in the larger picture, environmentally, legislation, the whole lot. So it's not huge numbers of people who, if you mention the reservoirs bill, people will just, and that's anglers who are on reservoirs.
What's that?
It's only really when it comes down to what it's designed to do and how that impacts on our clubs that committees, directors, chairmen really have to step up to the mark and read about it. Yeah. Generally speaking, no. Anglers, not terribly well informed.
Do you think, and I must ask this because we are where we are now, would they be well informed, or would the body or the organisation who deals with it, the one or two, the 6 and 7s, who actually, the committee that takes to do with the day-to-day, the week-to-week running, are they aware at this present time of the law at present, that if there was a failure on their reservoir, God forbid, and someone was to sustain damage to their property or lose life?
Yes.
Would they be aware now of the present burden on and responsibility on the club?
I think they would be blissfully unaware.
Yeah.
Because it's not something they regularly think about. They go out onto a lake to fish. It's a bit like parking your car in the drive. We know that if it was to roll down the drive into somebody else's property and that happened, then that would be our problem. But until it does, we don't think about it so much. And I think that's the kind of scenario we're looking at here.
You did talk at the start about the principles of the bill and
Yes.
being generally supportive of that. I'll ask the question, and again, you don't have to even answer it today, although it would be helpful, but you can come back at us at any time, because we have time on this. Do you see any other way, or any other legislative way, to actually regulate reservoirs in a safe way to protect life?
I think obviously every reservoir that exists of the 150, I think 51, they are old, generally speaking, they're old established reservoirs and probably do need inspection and some degree of year-on regulation, particularly those that are in high-risk designations. Finance is going to be the key to this, in my opinion, or lack of finance will be the key to it. And I agree with you. You know, if clubs are forced to go to bankruptcy, there's always somewhere where the buck stops. So it's not, you know, it's not as clear-cut as just walking away from it, because the problem, as Maurice says, continues if it's either an occupied reservoir or an unoccupied reservoir. So yeah, legislation needs to, absolutely no doubt, bring us into line with the EU. It needs to bring us into line with England, Scotland and Wales, and inspections and remedial work, and then some form of, whether depend on the designation of the reservoir, whether it's low, medium or high, some regular inspection needs to occur.
Maurice, you want to add to that?
No, not really. No, I think it just emphasised generally what Aidan has said, you know.
Have you ever... Sorry, go on ahead.
I think the difficulty, you know, as I outlined there, if you just look at the penalties, the monetary penalties, the liability, conviction and everything else and so on, you know, our committee is aware of all that, right? The general membership is not. But if I was to say that to members, if I was to raise that in an AGM and highlight the presentation, did the presentation the way I made the presentation to you today, I know there'll be an immediate vote, get rid of it. And then we get into the whole debate, can't. You know, so members would be, as they are at committee level, I mean, they're extremely concerned about this. We make no bones about it and so on, you know. We're an organisation which has been around a long, long time. It's really important in the local community and everything else and so on. And it'd be, you know, it was like the fish kill in 2008, whenever there was a major fish kill in our river and so on. It's just amazing, you know, people were just totally devastated. Not anglers, but the whole community. They could not believe that a river like the 6 Mile Water could not have fish in it and it could be polluted and destroyed the way it was. They were just devastated. It's just amazing. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever in your history, I'm sure maybe record books are kept, but have you any awareness of any time in your history your reservoir, your loch, your lakes being drawn down in order to fix equipment or to fix a structure or to change a valve? Or
yeah, I mean that's an ongoing thing and so on, because you've got to make sure that the outlets are okay, or the minor alterations on it. It's quite easy to draw them down anyway. Yeah.
So you've done that in the
past?
And well, restock's maybe not the right word.
Yeah, or to manage it, to control weed and stuff like that. Yeah.
So that's something that you manage on a daily basis.
We would share that.
Wouldn't be a burden.
Yes, we would, you know, at times of very high water, to avoid any impact on adjoining land, we will control the level in just by, you know, opening valves.
But we can only do that on one lake.
On one lake.
Final question from me. There's bound to be, where the water lies, where the lake is, there's bound to be a natural line where your water would lie, and then the built-up structure of the reservoir makes it rise or be topped up to the way it is now. Have you any idea or concept of where your natural line is that basically makes the bunging up or the reservoir redundant?
I actually asked that of some of our longer serving members, because particularly Lorries, which is our major reservoir. And they were of the opinion that there was never a lake there until there was a dam wall actually put in place. So by lowering that dam wall or taking it away, there is no natural level. It was a naturally formed, or a man-made form. Yeah, literally.
Yeah. Ours were water reservoirs for water supply.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so ours are just built into the side of a hill.
Right, okay. And Cal?
Our lake that we can control, Laurie's Lake, as Aidan said, used to be the old reservoir for Armagh, and then the older members in the club, which our club's over 60 years, 51 to near 60 years old. They were able to buy it off the government at that stage, and then we bought where our hatchery is situated, which used to be the old sort of the beds as such. So we literally, what we own, we bought off the government a way back years and years and years and years ago, because somebody had said, right, if you buy this here, you have your own lake, you have your own hatchery, you can develop your angling and the angling club from that, which we have done and successfully done over the years. So we're going back generations,
Do you have any relationship with local councils? Do they have any say or responsibility on your lakes?
We work well with the local council, but we've no definitive link with them where they come in and do anything for us or we do anything for them. Okay. We're aware of them. We meet with them quite regularly.
Yes.
But we've never actually needed to go to them for grants or anything of that nature.
Okay.
Been quite lucky.
Tom, you wanted then?
Yeah, just one observation. I suppose what you're really saying to us today here, if this bill goes forward as it is, it's not followed up by the proper financial structure, that your organisation and many more like you are going to go out of business, and these reservoirs are going to be lying in limbo.
Yes.
With nobody to look after them, care for them, or nothing like that.
That's essentially what it is, and that's what we would see as a factual thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't avoid that if this bill goes through without significant grant aid. That would be unavoidable for us.
Okay, that's right.
Okay.
There's a reservoir above us, and I'm not too sure whether the angling club has disowned it because it was leased actually from Holywell Hospital. And this is a reservoir above us, and the angling club that had it, apparently they've discontinued the lease. And it's, as we understand it, that is a reservoir above us, which is in a pretty poor condition. And we understand that's why they opted out, knowing that this was coming, and said, no, we're not renewing the lease.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no further questions in this presentation. So it remains for me to say thank you very much for your attendance here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, indeed.
We have been struggling to get private owners of reservoirs up to see us, so it has been very, very beneficial. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, Chairman, I'm sorry I had an about and I lost the thrust of the debate. But I think, given the level of analysis and commentary that these gentlemen have given us today, I would welcome if they wanted to issue us with a further written submission regarding some of the clarification of the matters. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, it has been Hansarded here, so it has been recorded. I'm sure you know that before you come in. But again, anything you want to add, any supplementary information you want to add to us, even at a later stage when it comes to your mind, certainly send it to us, and we'll scrutinise it along with everything else. Okay, so thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you very much.
And Morris, thank you very much for your time here.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, members, we will move on then to agenda item number 8, which is the Reservoirs Bill Oral Briefing from the Ulster Angling Federation. Can I refer members to the briefing papers from the Ulster Angling Federation on pages 79 to 81? Can I also say, as tabled today, are specific questions. I know that we have our key issues paper, which has allocated questions for us, but we also have specific questions then that would relate to the Ulster Angling Federation and the clubs, also in our tabled papers, page 21 onwards, I think it is. So just please be mindful of them also, members. But without further ado, can I welcome Robbie Marshall, Development Officer, and Jim Hockey, Chairman. of the Ulster Angling Federation. Gentlemen, you're very welcome here today. You've had the benefit of hearing the initial presentation on this. Members will have already had a chance to read your briefing paper, so if I can ask you to be in and about the 10-minute mark, if that's possible, to address the committee, that would be very welcome. So, Robbie, are you starting off for us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you very much for inviting us along here today. As you've already heard, this is giving quite a bit of cause for concern to some of our members. We'll just go over my briefing paper. The Ulster Angling Federation is a representative body for game angling associations in Northern Ireland. We have a membership of some 60 associations with total individual membership of some 7,000 anglers. The Federation represents anglers in discussions with public bodies, government and other NGOs, and we've been in existence since 1930. We're represented in a wide range of committees to ensure the concerns of anglers are heard. Our member angling associations are very concerned about the effects of this proposal on their reservoirs. It is important for tourism and local clubs that we allow existing fish populations to prosper. You'll all be aware of the Price Waters Coopers report, July 2007, for DECAL on the social and economic value of angling in Northern Ireland. And it states quite clearly that it's worth some £40 million to the Northern Ireland economy, mostly from game angling, and supports 780 full-time equivalent jobs. These jobs' economic benefits are to be maintained and enhanced. The provision of good water quality and the satisfactory fish stocks are absolutely vital to our fisheries and tourism. The following comments are made in that light. The publication of the first State of the Environment report for Northern Ireland in 2008, together with the introduction of annual Northern Ireland Environment Statistics reports in 2009, means that we now have an extensive set of indicators on the Northern Ireland environment. The following are extracts from the conclusions and key challenges from the most recent report prepared by the Government in 2013. As a result of this, we are better able to assess the effectiveness of environmental policies over the longer term and to base decisions on how we manage and protect our environment on appropriate evidence. The challenge of sustainable rural land use remains, but it is too soon to judge the impacts of planning policy changes on agri-environment schemes. However, it is clear from new evidence from the marine environment, from biodiversity indicators and the status of our waters that key ecosystems remain under threat. A fully integrated approach to the management of our land and water environment is needed. To address these challenges, we need to recognise the full value of the services of our environment, provides it's achieving a healthy economy, prosperity and well-being in our decision-making. The key principles underpinning the way forward are already widely recognised. Working to achieve resilient, diverse ecosystems capable of providing vital services which absorb pressures and respond to change. Valuing and managing natural resources to support economic and social prosperity. Protecting the quality of life by reducing pollution, protecting heritage and promoting sustainable land use. With all this in mind, we need careful consideration of the proposed reservoirs bill. The Federation is not opposed to the bill. In fact, we welcome it. It brings us into line with the rest of the UK and greater focus on human life. We have some 140 reservoirs, of which some are council-owned, some belong to Northern Ireland Water, and approximately 28% are privately owned, which includes some of our members. The Federation have grave concerns about the cost of obtaining a panel engineer's report, which would cost in the region of £10,000. As most clubs, as you've already heard, will not have the financial resources to pay such a bill. There's a real danger, therefore, that these type of reservoirs will be lost as an amenity. And I refer back to my previous comments on the state of the environment. Valuing and managing natural resources to support economic and social prosperity. Also develop innovative solutions to protect and enhance our environment. You've already heard from our club's members. Young people are involved, disadvantaged people from disadvantaged backgrounds are involved, disabled anglers are involved in these clubs, and they support the local community. With this in mind, there's a real need for government to provide a grant scheme to allow these clubs to comply with the new legislation. Otherwise, you may find that clubs will declare themselves bankrupt and walk away from the reservoir, leaving government to pick up the bill anyway. And just on the point that was made earlier, I came from a financial background in my previous life, and if a company's limited by guarantee, as most of our clubs would be, they'll not be liable. They'll just fold. All fees associated with the legislation need to be waived in the case of clubs who are providing amenity for local and tourist anglers. This is an extract from the recent strategic review of angling, which has just been completed. And one of the issues highlighted was the development of derelict waters for angling under the 1966 Fisheries Act. Derelict waters may offer the potential to increase opportunities for angling where there is a shortage of opportunities to meet the needs of local communities, which, it was suggested, is particularly acute around Belfast. And we could add to this with this bill. Again, any loss of amenity where shortages exist is not acceptable. The current proposal is that a structure with a capacity to hold 10,000 cubic metres or more above the natural level surrounding land be regarded as a controlled reservoir. There may be an argument to raise this to 15,000 cubic metres, which will allow some reservoirs to opt out of the legislation. In addition, the Department have not been able to provide the formula which has been applied for the escapement of 10,000 cubic metres above natural land level. And what I'm saying is there will be a certain amount retained where there's been a natural lake and previously no dam wall. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I think our Chairman, Mr. Hoggy, wants to say a few words.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of issues that have arisen since Robbie did that written submission. The first one concerns Section 17 and 22 in the bill concerning risk.
Sorry, tell us again the numbers.
Section 17 and 22 concerning the assessment of risk. Now, I've spent my lifetime in the construction industry where risk assessment has made a very great deal of difference in the reducing death and injury on building sites. Most welcome. But it was surprising to me, therefore, to see that in these sections, it's mainly section 22, there seems to be a confusion between risk and hazard. Now, when any risk assessment is being carried out, there are two completely separate entities, the risk and the hazard. The risk is the chances of something happening, and the hazard is the outcome or the result of the event. But in section 22 seems to confuse these. I think it's probably as a result of the department wanting to end up with an abbreviated designation of high, medium or low, but in doing so I think it rather confuses the issue. And the example you quoted earlier, Chairman, about the Boulder Dam, I think is a very good example, because the risk of the Boulder Dam breaking is probably infinitesimally low, but the hazard resulting from it, if it was to break, would be astronomically high. And we think that section 22 doesn't really bring that out, but that's a sort of a technical thing. The second point we wanted to make is we have concerns about implementation of the bill in relation to water. At the minute, Northern Ireland, to give you an example of why, at the minute Northern Ireland Water are implementing a procedure whereby they lease their reservoirs out to various people, and it has been the mother and father of a complete chaotic nightmare. I can't begin to tell you the mess that has been made of it, and it has caused untold problems for 7 of our clubs, and we really have quite a concern that what the principles in the bill we don't have a big argument about, as we've heard, but we're really very concerned about implementation as a result of what has happened with Northern Ireland Water. And finally, just a quick comment on the question of decommissioning. And what happens if some of these clubs fold and you have areas of land or water left more or less derelict? Well, there's a debate at 5 o'clock in the chamber today, Mr. Chairman, about the dumps on the River Faughan in County Londonderry, where millions of tonnes of illegal waste are dumped at the side of the river, and it appears that nobody's responsible for that. So I think that this question of responsibility is a live issue, and that's all, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Robbie and Jim. And albeit clause 22 may well be technical, I think you have hit basically the essence and the heart of this bill, and that is around the risk. and the hazard and the measurement of so. Because to me that is the nub of the matter, and how we actually measure that and how we actually perform under that pressure. Just on that issue, because okay, we have this controlled reservoir at 1,000 cubic metres, but the point you make in your presentation is that if it is a natural lake built upon by a dam, and the dam was to fail, really the flood water is only the artificial mass of water. So really, should there not be another measurement whereby you measure the scale and size of the reservoir, but then you take away the natural?
It's only the escapement amount that should be measured, because that's the only bit that can do the damage.
Yes, and then that in itself will then add to the scale and risk to the population downstream.
Yeah.
You would agree with that? That should be. Do you also then agree then that the structure itself and the soundness of the structure should also add part of the measurement and the assessment in order that you get designated either as low, high, or medium?
Oh yes, I think we have no argument with any of that. It's just the detail of the
problem is
expressed.
We don't know at this stage which reservoirs are sitting in which group, because originally I sat in the stakeholder group that went through this bill, and originally there was only going to be 2 designations, and we managed to get the 3rd brought in. So we don't know where some of the reservoirs sit as to whether they're low, medium or high. Obviously, the more reservoirs we can get into the low group, the better, because it virtually takes them out of the legislation. There's only a minimum amount that needs done. But I mean, in Armagh's case, you've already heard, and well, I'm not sure about Antrim, but certainly in Armagh's case, you've heard quite clearly. A club can't find £5,000 or £10,000 to get a panel engineer's report, which is what a minimum requirement for a high-risk reservoir. So that I already know of 2 reservoirs that have been bulldozed because people are so scared of this legislation.
Is that information that you'd be able to get to the committee?
No, it's not. But I'm telling you what people have done, because they know this is coming up the track to them, put a bulldozer through one of the walls of the reservoir and let the thing go. As far as they're concerned, that's it, finished with. It doesn't concern me anymore, it's gone. So you're in danger, you know, of losing environment, losing all these amenities between Antrim and Armagh, nearly 1,000 anglers. We've already heard from my presentation that the most recent angling review has highlighted that there aren't enough amenities, and could make the matter a lot worse.
Okay, Joanne Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. Robbie, as you say, you were part of that stakeholder group set up with the department, and in the minutes of that group you raised the costs associated with the reservoir safety being prohibitive, as you very eloquently outlined, with the financial resources. Can you outline a bit more detail the concerns, because you're obviously very, very passionate about it, this comes across, and the fact that you've said...
Well, most clubs are charities. Basically what they do is they have a number of members depending on the amount of water that they own. For example, I'm a member of the Ballynear Club, which is above Antrim. We have to close our books at 80 anglers because we can't accommodate anymore. And we actually go and fish other places, 2 of which may well be closed over this reservoir bill. So there's limited funds. We're not exclusive. We try to include everybody in the community and bring people into the angling clubs, but there's only so many we can bring in depending on what we have. So there's a limited amount of money, and there's no money anywhere else. To go to ask members for £200 or £300 each is just not.
It's not realistic.
It's not realistic, because you're talking about old age pensioners, you're talking about junior anglers, and you're talking about then the main members.
Okay. In your briefing, you suggest that there's an argument to raise the capacity to 15,000 cubic metres. Can I ask, did you put this to the department in your stakeholder meetings? And if you did, what was their view on this?
I did mention at the stakeholder meetings. I think it's 10,000 was seen as the correct amount for the bill, if you pardon the language, because I think that's in line with what is in the rest of the UK.
Okay, but you did raise those.
Did, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Robin Swan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, gentlemen, for your presentation. Robbie, you said you were part of the stakeholders group. Were you listened to?
I felt it was listened to in some ways, Rob, yes, because they did bring in the provision whereby there could be grant monies available, and that was one of the big things for me, because I knew in my heart of hearts that we would lose everything if there was no grant money available. So I was pleased to see that part of it brought in.
Could be grant money. In fact, there could be.
The fact that it could be, at least there could be.
Doesn't say there will be.
No,
That's
but I mean, it's as obvious as the nose in my face that if there isn't, we're going to lose all these amenities.
How many clubs own or would be designated as?
I'm only aware of Antrim and Armagh that were here today. There are other ones who there would be syndicates, angling syndicates, who wouldn't necessarily be members of the federation, who would have other reservoirs, but they may have, dare say, a wee bit more money because they're syndicates and they're sort of a closed shop. But I don't think it applies to very many clubs. When I put out my request, it was only Antrim and Armagh that we were able to ascertain without any doubt were owners. So from that point of view, it may not be as big a bill for the government.
Could I say that there's a potential difficulty in the horizon there, that even though the angling clubs may not own the reservoir, the risk is from the knock-on effect. For instance, to give you an example, Banbridge Council owned Corbett Loch, but it's run on a kind of a loose subcontract arrangement by Banbridge Angling Club.
They lease it.
So the council own the reservoir, Banbridge Angling Club run it and lease it. But if Banbridge Council are hit with some large cost in order to keep that reservoir going, they may feel that either they have to offload that cost onto the club or else shut the doors. So the fact that the club doesn't own the reservoir doesn't necessarily take the problem away.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Should just add that I've been told, I don't know if this is right or not, but I understand that for Camlock outside Newry, which Newry Council own, it's going to take approximately 2.5 million to sort that one out. So where do they find that?
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Joe Byrne, Deputy Chairperson.
Yes, Chairman, like others, I welcome the presentation, and again, it's good to see an organisation that has a strong sense of analysis on the issue. Jim, you made reference to risk and hazard, and also then there's reference to going up to 15,000 cubic metres of water. Can you tell us where has the department or the Rivers Agency got this wrong in relation to risk and hazard?
I'm sorry, the last bit again, please.
Where do you think the department have got it wrong in relation to not fully addressing the risk and hazard?
I'm not so sure that they haven't addressed it. It's just that it hasn't been well expressed. For instance, I think one of the boys earlier said that one of the reservoirs had been designated as high risk because there was one house downstream of the dam, which doesn't really tell you anything about the situation. The dam wall could be good for maybe another 200 years, but because there's a house downstream that might be affected by a deluge, it's been designated as high risk. But that's not to do with the risk, that's to do with the hazard. So, as I say, it's a conceptual matter that it confuses the information that's available and therefore confuses perhaps what needs to be done about it.
So therefore, would you welcome a reassessment of all of these reservoirs in that context of assessing both the risk and assessing if a risk did happen and there was a breach of a wall, then assessing what the potential hazard would be or damage?
Yes, very much so. I think that definitely needs to be done. There's a need to separate the risk from the hazard. I would expect that to be a desktop operation. I don't expect people having to go out and visit sites or anything. I'm sure all the information is available there. It's just a question of how it's expressed.
And finally, do you think that this reservoir build needs it all?
Well,
you're a man that can assess risk.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you've all heard the old phrase, if it's not broken, why are we fixing it? Now, as I understand it, there was a minor breach of a dam wall in a reservoir, or a dam, a few years ago in Northern Ireland. Before that, somebody else mentioned to me the last one was in 1902. To be blunt about it, we don't oppose this bill, and we don't oppose precautionary measures being taken, but when you get right down to brass tacks, are we faced with a lot of reservoirs that are about to collapse? I'm not sure that case has been made. That's all. But again, we don't oppose the bill. We accept the principles, and if that's the way it has to be, that's fine.
Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. Just regards to, given aside the high, low, medium risk allocation of controlled reservoirs, the operating requirements for a higher medium reservoir are quite, could be quite burdensome, where you're looking at a visit to a high-risk reservoir at least twice a year. Have you any thought processes around if that is appropriate or proportionate to the risk?
Again, you see, this is where I think the confusion between risk and hazard comes in.
Yeah.
As I say, if a civil engineer inspects a dam and says, right, that dam's in perfect condition, she's not going anywhere for 100 years, do you really need to inspect it twice a year? You know. However, if the dam's largely silt and there's a few cracks here, well, obviously no arguments. You know, that's where I feel the play-off between risk and hazard comes in.
How would you ever get that down on paper in legislation?
Well, this is a matter that the civil engineers deal with day and daily. There's a good example right out this window. You see these works outside this window? If a contractor goes to work there, he will not set foot on that site until he carries out a set of comprehensive risk assessments. And each one there will be different risk assessments carried out at different aspects of the work. And each one will say the risk is high, medium or low, the hazard is high, medium or low. Some of them can get more complicated than that, but let's call it that. And that will determine how he goes about that work. For instance, if there are adequate protection barriers along the top there, the risk of somebody falling off is low. But the hazard if he falls off and hits the bottom is high. Yes. So these are the sorts of things, and this is the sort of work that the like of the Institution of Civil Engineers do every day. As I say, it may well be that the way it's expressed in the bill is to simplify matters and make life a bit easier. But I just felt that the information flow and the way it's presented lacked clarity and didn't aid decision making as a result of that.
I can relate to what you say. Again, I was 20 years in the electoral game myself.
Well,
the whole range of costs, the cost of supervisory engineers, inspecting engineers, construction engineers if needed, the cost of remedial repair works recommended by the engineers, the cost of record keeping even, fees for registration and appeals, etc. If someone wants to contest something. Is it the case that they are all those engineers, because you have an inspecting engineer, supervisory engineer, can they not all be met by the same body of people or the same person? Is there this requirement for these differentials between engineers?
I hesitate to offer advice on that, Chairman, to be honest. I think that's something for the like of the Institution of Civil Engineers.
Why I could ask that is that you could be creating a whole industry or a whole sphere of engineers. Is that something that worries you?
Chairman, we just don't want to be seen to be criticising this bill because of our own sectional interest. If there's a safety issue, we appreciate that there's a need for a procedure, and we wouldn't presume to offer advice on how that should be carried out.
Okay. Sorry, Ian Mel.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you know, as the last presentation has done, you've done the exact same thing. You know, and I can understand, you know, groups coming in here and, you know, coming at it from the point of view that you have come at it. But you said there, you know, that there's 2 reservoirs there that were basically going to close up shop, you know, and would you imagine there that out of the 151 reservoirs, right? Mm-hmm. Is it possible there that there might be no need for 140 of them, and that they should be bulldozed and put out of the equation?
But how do you express no need?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, if you say that 2 have are going to do that, right? Well, then, what do you mean by that? You know, is it going to cause any risk by doing that?
What I said was 2 had been bulldozed because they were so scared of the legislation.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. But then from that, you know, if they were going to be bulldozed and are bulldozed, right? Well, then they mustn't be going to cause a risk.
No, those particular reservoirs probably didn't cause a risk, but the point is that our angling clubs don't want to do that. They want to use the facility.
Yes,
they want to be able to use the facility. So really to them, that's not an option. I mean, it was talked about, no mention of decommissioning. Probably don't want that. We want to keep these facilities. Don't forget, these facilities aren't just for anglers. They contribute to the environment of Northern Ireland in a big way.
Yeah. No, I understand, but I think there, you know, that we're early in the game to determine whether, you know, private-owned reservoirs or charity-held reservoirs are going to be standing a tremendous amount of cost. You know, there is provision within the bill, I believe, though, to assist, if not completely assist, you know, charities and
Well, I mean, that would be very welcome, and that's what we really need to see, because there's no doubt in my mind that that's what, if that doesn't happen, then we're going to lose these amenities.
Yeah, and it's only right that you come here and put it across the way that you have, you know. Well done. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can I ask, if this bill goes through the way it is, if there is no grant scheme in place, and those are 2 big ifs, massive ifs, and there is a threat then that clubs could go to the wall or fold or decommission, do you think then that there could well be a role for a collective of bodies, responsible bodies, the Rivers Agency, councils, all the angling clubs, your own federation, to come together to pull resources to see if we can get things at a lesser cost? Do you think is that practical? In reality, does it work? Do even the angling clubs work together in order to try and pull their resources to maybe get to employ an engineer amongst many to bring their cost burden down? Is that something that could be operational, practically done?
I would say, Chairman, with my experience in the construction industry, the potential for savings there would be limited, simply because if you're engaging consulting engineers to carry out a job of work, they will price that on the basis of what's required for that job of work. So many hours of time at such and such a rate, and writing up reports and so forth and attending meetings, that the consulting engineers will price that work for what it takes. Now, if there's a contract let for all the reservoirs in Northern Ireland, just to take an example, there's no doubt that the consulting engineering companies would price that more cheaply than they would on an individual basis, but nevertheless the potential for savings is always going to be limited.
Okay, any further comments or questions, members? Okay, members content to leave it there. Again, if you have any supplementary evidence or information that comes to mind after this meeting, then certainly pass it on to us and we'll certainly scrutinise it. All the best. Yes, can I just remind you, because we are struggling to get people, private owners, syndicates, I think it was mentioned, to come forward to give us their views on this bill. It's something we want to really step into, because without that we're blinded. And the one thing we cannot be when scrutinising this bill is being blinded with regards to people's views.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've passed on your invitation to 2 other bodies that I thought should be represented on the 18th of March. So.
Okay, well, that's all we can ask. But if you can encourage people to come up, because it really is in their best interests.
Oh, I know that.
To come up to see us. But the event is the 18th of March at 5:30 in Stormont. So that's the plug.
Well, I've passed it on already.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your time and your answers and your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, members, moving on then. Agenda item number 9 is the suspected illegal slaughtering of cattle. Oral briefing from Dard. Can I refer members to the information provided by Dard? No, you're okay. By Dard at pages 83.
Table papers too.
And additional papers, table papers at pages 15 to 16. At the Hansard of the urgent oral answer to the Minister of Health and Social Services and Public Safety can also be found at pages 84 to 86. Can I welcome, are they here?
Coming in now, shortly. Did you suggest?
Okay, members, agenda item number 9 is suspected illegal slaughtering of cattle. Can I welcome to the committee Michael Hatch, grade 6 from Dard, and Michael Jackson, Food Standards Agency. Gentlemen, you're very welcome to this committee on this very important and topical issue at present. Again, we'll allow you time for your briefing and then we'll go straight into questions if that's in order. Are you starting off for us?
Yes, I'll start off.
Okay. Further on.
I submitted a paper. I was just going to run through that. First of all, just to outline, we're obviously referring to the operation last Monday, the 3rd of March, when the PSNI led a multi-agency inspection of 2 premises in Forkhill and 1 in Bessbrook as part of ongoing efforts to tackle agricultural crime. And the police were accompanied by Newry and Mourne council officers as well as Department of Agriculture officers. Evidence of recently slaughtered animals was found at the agricultural buildings in Forkhill. There's no evidence at this stage that meat from the 2 premises in Forkhill has been placed on the market. Investigations are ongoing to determine the supply chain of meat from these unapproved establishments. This investigation covers both public health, for which Newry and Mourne Council and the Food Standards Agency, i.e. Michael beside me, have responsibility. But there's also animal health and animal byproduct issues which are the responsibility of my department. The police lead on all wider criminal activity associated with the investigation. The local authority then, Newry and Mourne Council, they're in this case, the district councils are enforcement authorities in Northern Ireland in relation to food safety. In this particular case, responsibility for the investigation into the suspected illegal slaughtering premises and beef distribution and any associated enforcement action lies with Newry and Mourne District Council. The Food Standards Agency is the central competent authority in matters of food safety and is instrumental in ensuring that appropriate measures are taken to protect public health. This includes assessing any risk to public health with respect to food safety implications and to manage that risk appropriately and proportionately in partnership with all other relevant authorities, including liaison with the Food Safety Authority of Ireland in the south. The FSA also has responsibility for enforcement of hygiene regulations in approved meat establishments. And in Northern Ireland, these inspections are conducted by the Department of Agriculture on behalf of FSA. The FSA is closely monitoring any possible risk to public health as a result of the operation and is working closely with the Department of Agriculture, Newry and Mourne Council, the police and the Food Safety Authority of Ireland, who have been alerted in case of any product being distributed across the border. The DARD enforcement role. It was DARD's central enforcement team which participated fully in the operation, providing assistance to the other agencies and undertaking animal health and welfare inspection and enforcement tasks under our own legislation. The CET conducted cattle identification inspections at the 2 premises in Forkhill. 3 cattle were seized by DARD under cattle identification regulations and are currently being held pending further inquiries about their identity. A number of ear tags were also seized, and at one of the premises in Forkhill, the CET seized carcass meat. Alleged breaches under identification, registration and movement, transmissible spongiform encephalopathy or TSE, animal byproduct and animal welfare regulations are now being investigated by my department. The final couple of paragraphs are just to clarify the central enforcement team within DARD. The CET is deployed full-time enforcing animal health and welfare regulations, and this role consists of conducting inspections, investigations and prosecutions. The CET works closely with other enforcement agencies, sharing intelligence, training, best practice and conducting joint inspections and investigations just like this one. This is particularly so with the current cooperation with the PSNI tackling rural crime, but also includes local councils, Food Standards Agency, HMRC, and the Southern Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, in particular their Special Investigation Unit. The CET is distinct from the Department's Central Investigation Service, which is a unit within the Finance Division. The CIS provides the Department and its agencies with a range of counter-fraud services that include investigating cases of suspected fraud perpetrated against financial programmes and schemes, but the CIS was not involved in the current DARD investigation. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, is there anything you want to add?
No, Michael, we put together a joint submission for the committee, so that hopefully has explained the roles of the various agencies in this particular incident.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I will put it out to the members. William Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I mean, it's part of my constituency in Newry and Armagh, where this legal slaughterhouse has been unearthed. I see you do say that there's no evidence at this stage of the investigation that meat from the 2 premises in Forkhill has been placed on the market. Now, if animals are being slaughtered, they're doing something to the meat. I'm sure they're not giving it away. I'm sure it's going somewhere. As yet, there's no evidence to suggest that where that's going to.
At this point, the investigation is still very much ongoing and live. We're in regular contact with our colleagues in Newry and Mourne Council, and as you can appreciate, it's one thing to detect the activity at the location to find out what's going on at a site. But then when it comes to establishing where meat may have gone, it's a much more complex issue that involves the District Council working with the colleagues in DARD, and obviously involves a lot of examination of paperwork to be able to establish what is going on. So that still is very much live, but at this stage, again, there is no evidence that the meat has been placed on the market.
Am I right in saying that a retailer butcher was also raided too on the same day?
There was a further site that was visited in relation to this particular investigation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Joanne Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. Michael, given that this was a multi-agency operation, how effectively would you read its response? Because you say in your brief that the Central Enforcement Team provided assistance and undertook inspection and enforcement tasks. And can you outline for us exactly what they did?
Well, there was both live animals on the premises that were investigated. So we had a 2-pronged role, and I must say first of all that we can't go into very specific details about the investigation because we don't want to jeopardise it. But our role initially was a support role for the agencies that had prime responsibility for this, which was the Food Standards Agency and Newry and Mourne. Over the last 18 months, we've been working very closely with the police in the whole southern region, E District and F District, regarding agricultural crime in general. So there's a number of investigations ongoing into general agricultural crime. So that was the background. I can't go into the specifics of how we got drawn into this particular investigation, but we did. Okay. And hence we gave full cooperation to the lead agencies. However, we also have an interest in cattle investigations. That's our responsibility for animal health and animal welfare. And during the course of the inspections, we gathered evidence and are currently investigating a number of breaches under animal health and welfare law.
Do you feel this multi-agency approach worked well then in this?
Well, it was overall, yes, excellent. The way forward, generally, in very general terms now, criminals don't limit their criminality to one aspect. So therefore, when we've got different agencies responsible for different legislation, we need to cooperate and join up. And I think this was a good example, and I think we're getting stronger in our relationship with the police and the other regulatory authorities and building trust. And an operation like last week that clearly discovered alleged offending, that is only going to bolster confidence in other agencies, because quite clearly in the planning for these operations, we have to share intelligence and we have to pool our resources.
Okay, sorry, I'll come back to you, Joanne.
Supplementary relates to this?
No, that's supplementary. You've had a question that's supplementary. I will bring you in later on. Tom Buchanan?
Yeah, well, no doubt a multi-agency approach is the only way forward in this, but when will you be in a position to know where this meat actually did go? Because, as my colleague said here, this wasn't just simply slaughtered for the sake of slaughtering it. There has been a market or an outlet somewhere. And, when will we be in a position to know that? Where this actually did go?
I think it's difficult to be precise about that. The reason being that one can only work with the intelligence and information that's gathered at the time of the event or that had already been provided. So that will give areas to be looked at. And I say I'm quite satisfied that Newry and Mourne are actively pursuing those and have been doing so since the events of last Monday. But investigations into distribution of food, particularly where it is being done below the radar, are extremely complex in nature and time consuming, and it's a question of being thorough and following all leads, say examining a lot of paperwork, conducting traceability. So unfortunately I couldn't be precise about how long it will take before the local authority would be in a position to be definitive about where meat had gone.
Yeah, well, I have no doubt this is of grave concern to the department, but we take a look at the two sites in question. How many people has been arrested?
That is a matter for the police. I don't believe that there were individuals arrested.
No arrests to my knowledge.
No arrests. Does that not cause you some concern that here's an operation that's been ongoing, an operation that's illegal, that is putting meat somewhere? We don't know where it's went into the food chain, we don't know where it has went, and then there's individuals involved in this, but no arrest has been made. That's not a very good multi-agency approach.
Well, the police led the operation. It was under police warrant that they executed on the day. The evidence has to be gathered and to be put to the suspects if they're sufficient. And at that point, neither the police nor certainly my investigation team are not in a position to pose those questions, because you have to gather your evidence, you have to build your case, and then put it to the defendants or the suspects in good time.
Okay, Rob Swan.
Thanks, Chair. Michael, you mentioned there were your tags seized. Were they traced back to Stone Common?
I actually don't know the details, and if I did know the details, I honestly just couldn't share that sort of information. That would form part of the investigation.
Sorry, and the further evidence gathering then, will you be using forensic accounting on either of the two sites or any of the individuals?
A forensic, in terms of a financial investigation? Again, I can't go into the detail of the department's investigation, but generally for animal health and welfare investigations, we don't use forensic accountants. We do use, at times, in general, I'm speaking here, forensic analysis, for example, of air tags, to see if air tags have been interfered with or reused. That's one of our options if you suspect an ear tag, for example, has been transferred from one animal to another. So that sort of forensic analysis is a, well, I don't want to just, I can't really go into the detail of the evidence gathering for this case because I simply don't want to jeopardise any prospects of securing a successful outcome.
You went out of your way to say that CIS wasn't involved or hasn't been involved at this stage. Why did you feel that was necessary?
Well, during the course of some of the media interviews last week, there appeared to be confusion on the part of I think, the interviewer about who the investigators were, and it's just simply to distinguish that for the benefit of the committee.
In terms of when forensic accounting would come into play in a food-related investigation, what tends to happen is that you have got sufficiently far within an investigation before you would consider that it would be fruitful to go down that particular route. So in general terms, forensic accounting in a food-related investigation is not the starting point. It's something that will be considered whenever the picture has been established.
FSA would do that, or?
In the case of this activity, it could be a number of bodies. It could be the local authority. It wouldn't be the FSA. However, we do have a way to assist local authorities with such operations because they can be expensive, and we operate a fighting fund whereby local authorities can apply to us and we will provide financial assistance to undertake whatever work is deemed necessary.
Okay. We're in again if you need, Robin. O'Byrne, Deputy Chairperson.
Thanks, Chairman. Obviously, as a scrutiny committee, we have to try and reflect the concerns of the public. Which of these organisations would have initiated this issue and the situation in relation to visiting these farms? Premises. Which organisation would have been first alerted?
Again, without wishing to go into any detail that could potentially compromise this particular investigation, the way that these operations come together, they start with fragments of intelligence. They may come from one source or from different sources, and then the challenge is to piece together the various bits of information that lead us to determining an operation is the right way forward. So information can come to more than one of the organisations through a different route. The key thing is that we work effectively together. Anyone who's an interest in relation to the food, fraud or animal related activities, we work together to put those parts of the jigsaw together and then mount an operation such as was launched last Monday.
Chairman, which agency or organisation would now have the greatest authority and responsibility in relation to progressing this to an ultimate conclusion?
Well, we'll share our roles essentially from the animal health and animal welfare investigation. That evidence will be gathered by the Department of Agriculture. Obviously, any evidence that's on the food safety aspect will be conducted by Nuri Moran with FSA oversight. Whether or not we can't prejudge.
So really there's a collection of agencies, but nobody's really taking the lead role, is that right?
I think it's important to understand that each of the agencies has a different role to play, and as long as we're all aware of what our role is and we're joining up effectively, then we should get the right outcome. I think this is just a reflection of how there are different organisations involved for different responsibilities. So as Michael said, as regards the live animals, that's very clearly a DARD responsibility. As regards the activities around food and the handling of food, the system in Northern Ireland is that is the responsibility of district councils.
I want to make one final comment. There's a general perception among the community that all of these agencies want us to go away in time and it'll be forgotten about.
I'll put that
well, we certainly would love the criminality to go away, and part of the operation and the logic for it is to hopefully act as a deterrent to others who would consider establishing anything that's going to threaten food safety. So, but in terms of our determination, as I said earlier, over the last 18 months, there's been a determined effort from the Minister and from her staff to tackle rural crime, to assist the police in terms of rural crime, and we've put resources into that, put efforts into that. We've had a number of successes in the broader agricultural crime fight, and I think last week, may also turn out to have been a successful operation.
If I could just add to that over the last 18 months to 2 years, there has been a significant number of issues that have been brought forward from intelligence that have led to detailed investigations, not all of which will immediately hit the public domain. But I would like to provide the assurance that in terms of anyone that is found or suspected of being found guilty of wrongdoing in relation to food safety matters, certainly that's something the Food Standards Agency treats with the utmost importance, and we will work with the various authorities to make sure that the matter is thoroughly investigated and brought to the appropriate conclusion.
John, would the department be satisfied that it was only cattle that were involved, or sheep and not horses?
Again, I think it would be better not to go into that particular area, given that this is a live, ongoing investigation.
Thanks, Gerald.
But just on that, because it is hard to leave it there, you could be assuaging the fears and concerns of the population if they were able to say now that there was no other animals involved.
My understanding is that the focus of this investigation has been around cattle.
Right, okay. Ian Mellon.
Right, thanks, Chair. Well, you've stuck to the script pretty good here, right? And I'll try and come at you from another angle, Like, could you tell me over this last 6 months how many cattle disappeared in the north? By farmers reported that they've been stolen or whatever. Because like that statistics there must tell you then that the amount of meat that has gone into a food chain here, or the possible amount of food that has gone into a food chain. So I would ask if you can answer the question today, that if maybe the committee could be supplied with the figures, from DARD, of incidents where cattle have been stolen, because unless we have joined up thinking on all of this here, like we're going on to a debate here on waste very shortly, right? And that might be very much more extensive than the single item that we're going to debate. It's the same with us here, if we find out that there's 1,000 cattle going disappear in a month, they're going somewhere.
Right. Well, certainly I can get the data for the last 6 months, but I think it's already been disclosed that over a period of years there was several thousand cattle, 9,000 cattle that have been reported as missing or stolen. Now, exactly where those cattle have gone, we don't know.
Well, I understand that,
but there's other places, other than necessarily the food chain. I mean, there is the possibility, for example, that cattle can be buried, and money saved for having them properly disposed of. And I don't want to say, I've no, obviously don't have evidence of this, but there's other alternatives for where cattle may be when they're reported as missing. Clearly there's a sanction if you fail to dispose of your livestock properly. You're not allowed to bury your livestock, so that's one option. But not hiding from the fact that some of this is serious criminality.
Yes, it's an organised crime.
And there is, in the general area, there is a lot of work ongoing with the police in terms of livestock theft. The Minister has met the Chief Constable on a couple of occasions. She's already met David Ford, Department of Justice, and is meeting again next week, I understand. At the operational level, there's a couple of groups the police have now got a rural crime unit. There's a steering group that is trying to, direct the police and ourselves in how best to tackle that. There is also a multi-agency livestock theft group that is being led by Chief Inspector Humphreys. And again, that includes the guards, our police, the Revenue and Customs, the department in the south, and they are looking at whatever way possible we can tackle this scourge. And I mean, there has been there's been a number of modest successes in that. For example, there's been on a couple of occasions stolen sheep have been identified through DNA and have been returned to their proper owner. There's been stolen cattle intercepted at a meat plant that have been re-identified, and again, that's forming part of an ongoing investigation. So there's been some successes on the ground, and there's also a number of measures there to try and assist the agricultural community to also do their own bit in terms of encourage them to there's a scheme now where texts get sent around the farmers if there's suspicious activity, and I'm on that myself, so I get a feel for what's happening on the ground, and there are quite a few texts, I'd have to say. So there's, people are being encouraged to freeze brand, to improve lighting, CCTV, so there, attempts are being made, but we don't hide from the fact that there's terrible criminality going on there, and of course that one of the threats of that is that meat and cattle are being re-identified and being submitted into the food chain. That is an obvious risk from that, and we're doing our utmost to try and challenge that.
One more. So, on a regular basis, would you say there's a multi-agency sit-down, to discuss the whole thing of
absolutely
crime and all of that?
The meeting that's the livestock theft group meets every month, and it moves about, both sides of the border as well, because there is allegedly a border trade in this as well. So we are trying to do as much as we can. The ministers are meeting as well to see if at their level what controls can be put in place to try and make it more difficult for these people to operate. And the police, I'm not here to speak for the police, but the police have devoted resources. The assistance that we're getting from the police now is absolutely first class in terms of our relationship in training. We've been training policemen and policewomen how to identify cattle when they have a roadside check, to establish what the correct paperwork is so they don't just get bluffed. They have our 24/7 phone line through to the department if they, for example, want to know who the owner is of livestock. The intelligence sharing, obviously can't go into detail, but there's been improvements there in terms of us sharing information. So there are lots of little bits going on, and I think gradually we're starting to close in on some of these gangsters.
Look, just to say congratulations on this and the efforts that you put into it, and I'm very happy with the stuff that you've said there at the last, regarding your conscientious approach to the whole
Okay, Alderman McMullen.
Mr. Chair, the cattle that was found on the scene, were they tagged?
I really don't want to
Right,
go
okay.
into the detail, but that's clearly what we're investigating. It's an offence to not have your animals properly identified,
Aye.
and so we'll be investigating any offending of that nature.
But you did mention there could be the case of some of these cattle that goes missing every year that could be buried. You know?
Yes, well, the destination for when people report cattle as having been stolen or missing, we're and neither ourselves nor the police are convinced that every single one of those animals was indeed stolen.
Would you agree that this is turning out to be a bigger thing than what people maybe thought it was? Going back a little bit, you know. But when we're really getting into it now, it's starting to evolve into seems to be a very well organised criminal operations going on here.
There certainly is, yes, a degree of organisation.
You not say it's a high degree of organisation? But to move cattle about, to get them killed, to get them out away and all that there, you know, you don't do that overnight with half a dozen cattle. You have to be well organised for that.
There is certainly a level of organisation, but we accept that there is a worrying level of criminality, but we must also keep it in proportion. There's 1.5 million cattle in Northern Ireland, and we're talking about, you know, if it's 9,000 over 3 years, I don't know what that is per month, I can't divide that in my head here, but we're talking hundreds out of 1.5 million, and there's thousands, tens of thousands of movements of livestock as part of normal business, and we have to have systems and regulations in place that take account of normal business. And so our regulations are made to try and keep overall control, but you can't completely have a system in place that prevents movement and prevents normal agricultural business.
That's the purpose of the tags.
Yes, the whole identification, registration, and movement system is, you know, a system to ensure traceability of livestock, so that we can know where animals are at any one time. And to be honest, in Northern Ireland, we have a very good knowledge of where livestock are. So if we get hit by epizootic disease and we have to trace animals, the vast majority of them will be where they're meant to be. But undoubtedly there are some animals that aren't, and some animals that have had identification switched.
I'll go around again, Oliver, if need be. Can I ask, because again, it's obvious that there's a lot of information you can't or not willing to divulge at this present time because there is live investigations. But if we can just bring some clarity to the situation, what have been the alleged breaches or offences that have been committed here? And then what is the maximum penalty for those?
From the perspective of food safety and those matters that Newry and Mourne would be responsible for investigating, clearly it is illegal to slaughter animals for human consumption and place them on the market other than through an approved establishment which has the appropriate controls in place. So that will be a key issue that Newry and Mourne will be investigating.
Well, from our side, you know, the animal identification regulations are what we're investigating here, and also animal byproducts. You know, proper disposal of animals and parts of animals is again a legal obligation, and you know, very general terms, we're investigating allegations along those lines.
And again, for both of you, maximum penalties?
Well, just in general terms, not talking about this case because...
No, we can't.
In
In general senses, what are the maximum penalties for this?
Well, there's imprisonment for animal health and welfare legislation. You can be imprisoned for 3 months and more. Penalties... Maybe better wait and give you a written reply on this on the actual penalties. I don't want to.
What we
don't be guessing.
don't want to do is give out false information. So yes, if you're not sure, yes, we will wait for a written submission. We'd ask that to be submitted as soon as possible, rather than give false information.
Right, and just to clarify, it will be just in general.
Yes, absolutely, no specifics.
Vary from one piece of legislation to another.
Yeah. Now, if I can talk about this specific case. And again, I understand you'll not be able to tell us some aspects of it, but you did say that there was carcasses found on site.
Yes.
Where were they? In a shed, or where were they?
I think the important fact is that there were carcasses found that were not in an approved establishment for slaughter and cutting. So the fact that they're in any kind of building which isn't an approved establishment is a matter that needs to be fully investigated.
Okay, William Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just can I say it's my constituency, and I welcome the fact that you have found this illegal slaughterhouse, and I mean it certainly has health implications. So it's good that at least that's stamped. There's a number of issues around the whole situation. Like being a farmer myself, so I'm fairly aware of. I mean, I'm sure you'd agree with me that no one would send their cattle to a legal slaughterhouse if they were prime animal. I mean, there'd be no benefit in doing that. It'd be negative from the farmer's point of view. So it would look. Someone had to move those cattle illegally to that slaughterhouse. So there has to be a. You know, there should be some evidence somewhere there if you find tags and stuff where those cattle came from and what has happened. And I just hope that, you know, in the past, it seems to be that it's difficult to get evidence on people that these things like this, and I just hope you can at this time get some evidence and you know, put a stop to this sort of behaviour, because I mean, farmers and herds in Northern Ireland are strictly monitored as to where their cattle goes, and if they're moved from herd to herd, that's okay. But if they're moving to a legal slaughterhouse, I mean, you know, it's something that you just can't do and cover up. You know, so well, let's hope that every effort's made to make those amenable. You know, that is guilty of this. I think there has to be farmers. This illegal slaughterhouse is not just acting on its own. There has to be a bigger picture here.
I think if I could just perhaps give you some confidence around where we're going in this sort of general area. Following the horsemeat incident last year, you'll probably be aware that there have been several reviews into that particular incident. The Food Standards Agency commissioned its own review by Professor Pat Troop at a very early stage to see what we can do to improve the regime. And one of the recommendations that we're currently implementing is to develop an intelligence hub. And this will be a management system that will bring lots of different factors in. We will look at horizon scanning, things that could be happening out in the environment that would encourage people to be thinking about breaking the law in relation to food. Then pulling in the snippets of information I referred to earlier that come from various sources, from whistleblowers and people who are prepared to share information around wrongdoing. And certainly this is something which we're building the model up at the moment. This will result in a series of what we call agents being in place, and there'll be an agent for Northern Ireland. And that person will have the responsibility to build these networks and get closer to the ground and make sure we pull all of the information together in a timely way and get to the point where we're better able to anticipate what people might do, rather than being in a situation where you're trying to deal with it once someone has done something wrong. So there's an awful lot of work still ongoing, and indeed whenever Professor Elliott's report is published in late spring, early summer, there'll be further work that's agreed to there to build this whole system to make life more difficult for those who are intent on breaking the law.
Okay, Joanne Dobson.
I know you say you can't go into specific details while the investigation, the bridges once been investigated, but when do you feel we'll know the outcomes of the investigation? How close are we to? Have you any idea?
Again, it would be impossible to put any concrete measure around that, because
at a fairly advanced stage, or?
I think it's fair to say, in terms of the complexity of food-related crime, it can be quite long and drawn-out processes. And I can speak from experience in knowing that from the time you unearth the initial facts to get the level of detail, and as I said, if, for example, you had to go down the route of forensic accounting and everything that's involved with that, it can be a long process before one's even ready to have a file for consideration by either the local authority or by DARD for taking the matter fairly. So it is...
Talking months then down?
Most definitely. It is a process which you can't rush. You have to take the time to establish the facts and put all the evidence together.
Okay, Tom, you're okay? You're happy? Robin, you want to come in? No. You okay? Joe?
No, Chairman.
You okay? Ian? Ian's away. Oliver, you want to come in?
No, thanks, Chair. No, thank you.
Okay, well, I think everything has been covered that can be covered today. I think all the members have asked the questions in different spheres that we can to interrogate this and to scrutinise this. I do feel that we will need to have a follow-up presentation from you. Again, I know you can't put timescales on it, and we don't know what progress will be made. That's in the hands of yourselves as investigating agencies, along with the PSNI. But the police, the PSNI, are up to talk to us on real crime in May, and I feel that might well be a good opportunity to have yourselves back up again alongside the PSNI in order to talk about this. They're up to talk about real crime. But I think then, if you were up at that time also, then we can maybe get into specifics. Hopefully, maybe more so on this this case, and then other developments that hopefully have come out of this case, and then of course the further developments in what was last year, the horsemeat scandal, and maybe get an update on that also, because again. Through my knowledge, I don't believe that there has been any arrests around that scandal.
Just to emphasise the point that I made earlier around how long these investigations can take, there are still police-led investigations into matters associated with the horsemeat incident that are ongoing. Okay. Those are progressing, and it's just a reflection of how long it takes to be able to get matters of this nature to the point where you're ready to make a case, but I can assure you that's definitely very much ongoing.
Okay, can I ask, was anyone, just I'll bring Robin in, but was anyone brought in even for questioning by the PSNI, or if you have jurisdiction yourself, authority to do that yourself, was anybody brought in for questioning on this incident?
I couldn't answer in relation to the police, but certainly what tends to happen in investigations of this nature is that you gather the initial evidence at a particular location on a day. You make an assessment, you make inquiries, and you try to establish what you think is going on. It would be quite normal then for any individual who you think may be associated with that to be formally interviewed sometime down the line. That tends not to happen there and then on the day. You gather the evidence, and then that's when you would normally conduct formal PACE interviews.
Okay, Robin.
Thanks, Chair, for that memory. Gentlemen, you talked about all the different agencies you've worked with. Is there an international aspect to this as well that you're working on? And I don't mean just Republic of Ireland, I mean European.
In relation to this...
Not specific, in general, to the work you do in regard to illegal meat or horse meat or whatever you want. Is there...
Well, there is some work done Europe-wide in terms of intelligence, following up of investigations, and certainly my own staff have had, on occasions, had to seek witness statements from other countries, across Europe. So, but I'd probably be exaggerating to say that this is, an international investigation.
But on the wider front, in the wake of horse meat, the European Commission have set up a specific food fraud unit that will be tasked with addressing this issue on a community-wide basis. So the world has definitely changed following horse meat, which did span across Europe, and this new food fraud unit will allow a much more structured approach across the various countries to be taken forward.
Okay, thanks.
Can I seek agreement from the committee that we be provided by written updates on the situation as it develops before May? Members agreed?
Agreed, Chairman. Can I just ask one further question, Chairman?
Hey, Joe. Yep.
In relation to the previous issue of horse meat in that part of the world, the last time, we were told that a number of crates of imported meat that were essentially horse meat that had been mislabelled were in cold storage in Uri, and I remember asking the question some months afterwards, had they been disposed of? And we were told then that they still had not as of then been disposed of. Have they ever been disposed?
The key point here is that any meat which was not correctly labelled was prevented from entering the food chain and being distributed. But as I said earlier, this is still very much a live investigation, and depending on the offences that may have been committed, it's necessary to preserve the evidence. But the key thing, and again the assurance, is that once this material has been found, then it is taken under appropriate control of the authorities and cannot enter the food chain. It will be disposed of at a point in time. As with any other evidence, will be dealt with whenever the matter has been brought to a conclusion.
That's fine, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then can we seek agreement maybe to forward the papers and the Hansard from the meeting today to the Committee of Health and Social Services and Public Safety?
Yeah.
Okay, again, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time here and your presentation and your answers to our questions. Thank you. Okay, now. Okay, members, we have got about 3-4 minutes of an agenda here before I think there's going to be anticipate a vote. So if you bear with me, we'll get through it. Agenda item number 10 is the SL1 Agriculture Student Fees Amendments Regulations Northern Ireland 2014. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 88 to 89 and papers from the department at pages 90 to 107? Can I advise members that fees will be increased by 2.8% for the annual basic tuition, and the reduced tuition fee for sandwich students will be increased by 2.9%. Increases are determined by the underlying annual rate of inflation. Each devolved administration can devise its own approach to tuition fees, and Northern Ireland has opted for lower fees for domestic students and higher fees for students from the rest of the UK. Member States are charged at the level set in the relevant Member State, and in that case, the Republic of Ireland students are charged €2,750 registration fee. The committee has previously considered this issue in 2012 and 2013 and agreed the annual increases in fees. Can I seek comments from members? Are members content with the merits of the policy?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Agenda item number 11 then is correspondence. Can I refer members to correspondence received at pages 110 to 114? Are members content to action correspondence as suggested on the index sheet at page 109?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you, members. Agenda item number 12 is for the work programme, which is at pages 142 to 147. Can I ask members to note that some sessions have been rescheduled to post-Easter to allow for the 4 additional briefings that the committee agreed at the meeting last week. The briefings with the SDA Farmer Group, the Northern Ireland Livestock Auctioneers, has been provisionally scheduled for the 18th of March, but still have to be definitely confirmed.
SDA are now definitely confirmed.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to Stella for helping in this regard.
Okay, and as I did earlier, can I remind members again of the stakeholder event for private sector owners of reservoirs next Tuesday, the 18th of March at 5:30 p.m. in room 115. Now, at the minute we have one table. We may expand into 2 tables, so if people are available, certainly that would be good to have you there, and Stella will send out maybe an email just to see if anybody can volunteer in advance for that. They may not be needed, they may well be, but we'll see how it goes, and we'll find out as people come in with the responses. Can I seek agreement for the forward work programme?
Great.
Great, okay. Agenda item number 13, is there any other business? Oliver?
I think it'd be a worthwhile exercise of this committee writes to the Garda Síochána and ask them how their investigations are going, their side of the border, or in cooperation with PSNI on this whole aspect, because we're only getting one version of it here, and it is cross-border, so I think we should be finding that out as well.
Could we write to the committee, the committee responsible for scrutinising the Garda?
Whatever.
The Doyle Committee?
Yep.
To see what they have found out, what work they have done on it? Yep. Are you happy enough?
And Chairman, to support what Oliver has asked, but I think we also would want to know if the two departments in the north and the south have had any communication or ongoing liaison in relation to these matters.
Yeah, okay.
It is ironic that, you know, I don't think we should get, that there is nothing happening here. There's nothing happened in Europe either. I don't think there's been one conviction in Europe over that whole horsemeat scandal.
No, absolutely.
I mean, in Europe itself.
Yeah.
Is it just horsemeat, or is it this?
No, is it with regards to the specific case we were on about today with the illegal slaughter, the suspected illegal
I
slaughter?
understand that.
Yeah.
The horsemeat thing in
Oh,
general.
absolutely. And again, you asked the question and we received the answer. And
Illegal
I'm
slaughter.
happy enough.
It was offered for
Delivery
him,
of
but
horsemeat in general.
But we do appreciate that there is a live investigation, so there will be aspects that they will not be able to tell us, because if it did, then it would jeopardise the case. Any other business? Okay. Agenda item 14 then is the date and time of the next meeting, which will take place on Tuesday, 18th of March 2014 at 1:30 p.m. in room 30, Parliament Buildings. Declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, members.